In November 2024, cybersecurity researchers uncovered something chilling. A sophisticated hacking operation targeting WhatsApp accounts worldwide. But this wasn't your typical scam operation. This was Star Blizzard, one of Russia's most advanced cyber espionage units. Now, before we get into the WhatsApp campaign, let me tell you this. I've been tracking Russian cyber operations for years, and what we're seeing now is crazy compared to their attacks a few years ago. Star Blizzard, also known as Cyborgium, isn't just another hacker group. They're professionals, working directly for Russia's Federal Security Service, the FSB's Center 18. Since 2017, they've been running some of the most sophisticated phishing campaigns we've ever seen. These guys create perfect replicas of legitimate communications, targeting high-level government officials, academics, and think tanks. Their focus? Stealing credentials and gathering intelligence that serves Russian state interests. They're what we call an Advanced Persistent Threat, or APT. Think of them as digital spies who never sleep, never quit, and keep evolving. They've hit organizations involved in everything from diplomacy to Ukraine aid, and they're getting better at it. They don't just blast out random emails hoping to get lucky. Every target is carefully chosen, every attack custom crafted. And that WhatsApp campaign? That's just the latest evolution in their playbook. So let's go to the beginning of Star Blizzard, because what I'm about to tell you about their operations will change how you think about cybersecurity forever. Let me show you something that'll blow your mind about how Star Blizzard actually picks their targets. You know how you can learn a lot about someone just by checking their social media? Well, these guys took that concept and turned it into a weapon. They don't just randomly pick targets. They use what we call OSINT, open source intelligence. It's basically every piece of public information about you online. Your LinkedIn profile, they're reading it. Your Twitter posts, they're analyzing them. Those professional conference photos you're tagged in, they're mapping your entire network of contacts. But here's where it gets really interesting. In 2022, right after Russia invaded Ukraine, Star Blizzard completely changed their game. They started targeting anyone involved in Ukraine aid, defense contracts, even U.S. Department of Energy facilities. I'm talking about a massive expansion of their operation. Their process is methodical. First, they build a complete profile of their target. They know who you work with, who you trust, what projects you're involved in. They study how you write, what topics interest you, even what professional groups you belong to. It's like they're building a digital clone of your professional life. They use all this information to craft perfect impersonations. They'll pose as your colleagues, your professional contacts, even officials you've never met, but would trust based on your position. The documents they send look legitimate because they know exactly what you're expecting to see. What makes this so effective is the precision. By December 2023, Five Eyes intelligence agencies were raising major alarms. Star Blizzard wasn't just hitting random targets anymore. Each target carefully chosen, each attack custom-built. The really scary part is that everything they need to target someone is all public information. They're not hacking databases or breaking into systems to get this intel. They're just better at finding and using the information we all leave scattered across the internet every day. Think about that next time you update your professional profile or post about your work online. Because somewhere, someone might be watching, learning, and planning how to use that information against you. By 2023, Star Blizzard had evolved into something security researchers hadn't seen before. You know, those legitimate email marketing platforms like HubSpot and MailerLite. Instead of sending emails from suspicious Russian domains, they were now sending them through trusted marketing platforms. It's like hiding in plain sight, but that was just the beginning. Their infrastructure, like the servers and systems they used for attacks, became nearly impossible to track. This wasn't just about hiding. This was about building an infrastructure so sophisticated that even when we knew they were there, we couldn't prove it. And that's exactly what they needed for their next phase of attacks. In 2024, Star Blizzard took their game to a whole new level. They didn't just want to attack their targets. They wanted to know everything about how their targets' computers worked. They developed something we call browser fingerprinting. Think of it as a digital lie detector that checks everything about your browser. Are you running security tools? What plugins do you have installed? Are you a real person or a security researcher's automated tool? They built 3 main functions into their attack sites. First, there's plugins empty. It checks if your browser has any plugins installed. Sounds simple, right? But here's the thing. Most regular users have plugins, while security research tools often don't. Then there's automation tool. This is where it gets scary. This function could detect if the site visitor was using security research tools, like Selenium or Phantom.js. If it spotted these tools, the site would show nothing suspicious. But the real masterpiece was their PDF weaponization. They created perfectly normal-looking PDFs using LibreOffice 7.0 with American English settings to look legitimate. Each document had a different fake author name, but they all shared hidden patterns in their metadata. Inside each PDF was a malicious link, carefully placed to look official. When security researchers tried to investigate these attacks, the sites would detect them and show clean content. But when real targets visited, the full attack would launch, and the sites would send all the browser data back to Star Blizzard's servers using their send to back-end function. Here's where Star Blizzard's years of preparation came together in what I consider one of the most brilliant and terrifying attacks I've ever seen. The WhatsApp campaign. They created a 5-stage trap that was practically impossible to resist. It started with an email, but not just any email. One that looked like it came from a US government official, inviting the target to join a WhatsApp group about helping Ukraine. These weren't random targets either. These were people who actually worked on Ukraine aid initiatives, the kind of people who couldn't ignore this type of message. Now, here's where it gets clever. The email included a QR code, but it was deliberately broken. Think about that for a second. They wanted it to fail. Why? Because when it didn't work, the target would naturally reply asking for another way to join. That's exactly what Star Blizzard wanted. When the target responded, they'd send a follow-up email with a t.ly shortened link. These links are everywhere on social media, so they don't raise red flags. But this one? It led to a perfect copy of a WhatsApp invitation page, complete with a new QR code. But that QR code wasn't for joining a group. It was actually designed to link a new device to the target's WhatsApp account. When scanned, it gave Star Blizzard complete access to the target's WhatsApp through WhatsApp Web. They could read messages, access contacts, everything. The genius of this attack is how it used our natural behaviors against us. Each step seemed perfectly reasonable. Each action was something you'd normally do, but together, they formed an unstoppable chain that led straight to compromise. In early 2024, Star Blizzard made a crucial mistake. After years of using a single domain registrar, think of it as their digital real estate agent, they suddenly started spreading out. They began using multiple providers. Hostinger, Real-Time Register, GMO Internet. It was like watching a criminal suddenly change their routine after years of consistency. I've tracked their domain registrations. Let me show you the pattern shown on screen here. Then in May, they registered 3 domains in 2 days, shown here. This wasn't random. This was a calculated expansion. Microsoft's security system, Defender, was watching. Every time someone clicked a suspicious link, every time someone accessed a questionable website, Every time someone fell for their tricks, the system was logging it. These weren't just random alerts. These were breadcrumbs leading right back to Star Blizzard. The alerts tell a story. Suspicious URL, clicked. Connection to adversary in the middle phishing site. User compromised, an adversary in the middle phishing attack. They tried to hide their tracks using legitimate-looking security certificates from Let's Encrypt and Zero SSL. They even set up seemingly innocent-looking domains like these ones. But Star Blizzard didn't know it yet. These breadcrumbs were leading straight to their downfall. In what might be the biggest cyber counterstrike of 2024, Microsoft and the U.S. Department of Justice finally made their move against Star Blizzard. This wasn't just another takedown. This was the result of years of tracking, analyzing, and planning. The numbers tell the story. 107 domains seized in a single coordinated strike. Microsoft grabbed 66 domains while the DOJ took control of another 41. These weren't just random websites. These were the command centers Star Blizzard used to target U.S. government employees and nonprofit organizations worldwide. Every domain they used for their WhatsApp campaign. Every server they used to launch their phishing attacks. Every piece of infrastructure they'd built over years. Gone. It's like watching a chess grandmaster suddenly lose all their pieces in a single move. I've been in this game long enough to know this isn't the end of Star Blizzard. They can simply spin up new network infrastructure. Or maybe they already have multiple networks. The question isn't whether Star Blizzard will be back. Because trust me, they will be. The question is, do you think you would be able to spot a phishing email that was carefully crafted to you by an elite military hacking unit? I think you may be surprised by the outcome. Meet No Name 057. They're hacktivists, digital soldiers fighting for political causes. Their mission? Simple. Punish anyone who backs Ukraine against Russia. When the Netherlands pledged 6 billion euros in military aid to Ukraine in February 2025, these hackers didn't just take notice. They took aim. Then the Dutch added another 3.5 billion for 2026, and No Name 057 decided to strike. Over 50 Dutch websites knocked offline through DDoS attacks. That's when you flood servers with so much traffic they collapse under the weight. Their message on X was brutally clear. How does a Telegram chat and some code take down a nation's websites? Well, I'm about to show you their full operation. An assault so effective the National Cybersecurity Center had to acknowledge it publicly. It kicked off with government sites. Municipal pages in Groningen and provincial hubs in Breda got slammed first. If you lived there, you couldn't pay your taxes. Couldn't check local alerts. Nothing. Just error messages and loading screens that never finished. Then, the dominoes started falling. Transportation sites like GVB and Arriva crashed next. Commuters stood at stations, staring at their phones, no idea when the next train was coming. Delivery drivers couldn't access schedules. Media outlets weren't spared either. NRC, one of the biggest news sites, went dark. The attack cut the information flow right when people needed updates most. But how did they pull this off? The weapon was DDoSia, a battering ram No Name 057 created back in August 2022. DDoSia isn't just some basic script. It's coded in Golang, a programming language that's lightning fast and works across Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. This matters because it means attacks can come from literally any computer system. What made this attack next level was how they built their army. No Name ran a Telegram channel with 45,000 followers. They sent out a call to arms, distributing their DDoSia tool through a simple zip file containing dosia.exe. Each volunteer got a unique client ID to authenticate them. They paid people to join the attack. Regular people, not hackers, earned rubles through TON cryptocurrency for letting their computers hammer Dutch websites. The tool used AES GCM encryption to hide communications with command and control servers. This military-grade encryption meant Dutch network defenders couldn't see what targets were coming next or who was calling the shots. By June 2023, DDoSia had grown from a small operation to more than 10,000 active users, a 2,400% increase. That's an online militia, all coordinated through encrypted Telegram chats that kept the whole operation invisible to authorities. Apeldoorn, Nijmegen, Tilburg, one by one. Dutch municipal sites went dark. Noord-Holland, Zeeland, Drenthe, Overijssel, Noord-Brabant. Provincial government pages failed across the country. Within hours, at least 20 critical websites were completely inaccessible. A mother in Groningen can't register her newborn. A small business owner in Breda can't file permits. A student misses application deadlines because systems are down. These are the real-world implications of cyber attacks, don't you see? As the DDoS tsunami hit. This wasn't some elite hacker unit with government backing. This was a distributed, crowdsourced attack carried out by thousands of regular people, all incentivized by cryptocurrency payments, all following instructions from anonymous operators on Telegram. The attacks only grew from there. By flooding Dutch digital infrastructure with junk traffic, No Name demonstrated a new kind of power. The ability to recruit an army of people with nothing more than a Telegram bot and the promise of cold, hard crypto. Their post on X laid it bare. Netherlands, you chose Ukraine. Now eat this. What's remarkable here is that they never tried to steal data. Not a single byte. This wasn't about theft. It was about sending a message. Cross Russia's allies, and you will pay the price. But law enforcement had already been on their trail. Back in July 2024, Spanish authorities managed to arrest 3 DDoSia users for similar attacks against NATO countries. 3 arrests. That's it. When you've got over 10,000 active members and a Telegram channel 45,000 subscribers deep, losing 3 soldiers doesn't even register as a scratch. While Dutch IT teams restored service, the No Name Telegram channel never stopped humming. New DDoSia files distributed. New targets discussed. New cryptocurrency payments flowing. On June 24th, 2023, No Name 057 actually targeted sites affiliated with the Wagner Group, the Russian mercenaries who briefly rebelled against Moscow. Crowdsourced chaos is the new normal. A Telegram message goes out. Thousands respond. Websites collapse. Then everyone goes back to their regular lives, a little richer in cryptocurrency. In cybersecurity, it doesn't take long to go from hunter to hunted. I want to take you deep inside ransomware, the multi-billion-dollar criminal industry that's hitting companies and hospitals every single day. Groups like LOCKBIT and EVEREST run these operations like businesses. They break into your network, encrypt all your critical files. If you don't pay, they leak your sensitive data on the dark web. They're not playing games. These ransomware crews make millions by holding data hostage. But, oh, how? The turntables. LOCKBIT got hacked. And it's not the cops. But I'll get to that. What happens when the most dangerous hackers in the world find themselves exposed? What happens when their secrets spill onto the same dark web where they've tormented their victims? You're about to find out. Before we get into the escalating LOCKBIT hack, I need to tell you about what happened back in 2024. It's related to LOCKBIT, so you will need to hear it. Law enforcement launched Operation Kronos. This wasn't some small-time bust. The UK's National Crime Agency and the FBI coordinated a massive strike against LOCKBIT. They identified the actual servers running LOCKBIT's infrastructure and seized them completely. When victims visited LOCKBIT's dark web portals, they didn't see ransom demands anymore. They saw police banners. The authorities had taken control. The cops seized 34 servers, shut down 14,000 rogue accounts, froze 200 crypto wallets, nabbed 2 suspects from Poland and Ukraine. They grabbed over 1,000 decryption keys. With these, companies that paid nothing could recover their files for free. A direct hit to LOCKBIT's wallet. Key players who thought they were untouchable suddenly found themselves vulnerable and exposed, just like their victims. LOCKBIT's leader, who called himself LOCKBIT Sup, was finally unmasked. So that would be the end of the story, right? But that's where you're wrong. Because LOCKBIT didn't actually pack up shop and go home. No, not at all. They still operate from the confines of Russia. So if law enforcement can't bring them down, then who will? Fast forward to April 2025. Another Russian hacking operation called EVEREST was running strong. Then one day, visitors to EVEREST's leak site saw something different. The entire site was defaced. Their victim data was gone. Instead, a message appeared on the screen. Don't do crime. Crime is bad. XOXO from Prague. Their leak site became completely compromised by a simple security vulnerability they'd overlooked. Cybersecurity researchers who analyzed the breach found that EVEREST had failed to patch a known web application flaw. Basic security hygiene they'd ignored. Typical. But while EVEREST were trying to rebuild their servers, there was one question on everyone's minds. Who was Prague? Was it a rival gang? A vigilante? Nobody knew. Then in May 2025, LOCKBIT got hit again. But this wasn't law enforcement. Their affiliate panels, the dashboards where LOCKBIT's criminal partners manage attacks and ransoms, were once again gone. The attacker dumped everything. Bitcoin wallet addresses that showed exactly where ransom payments were going. Chat logs with desperate victims begging for more time. Internal messages revealing their operations. Even more damaging, the hackers exposed LOCKBIT affiliates' user credentials. Some of the world's most notorious cybercriminals were using passwords like WeekendLover69, MovingBricks69420, and LOCKBITProud231. Kind of says a lot about the guys who terrorize children's hospitals. And at the bottom of the data dump, the exact same note on LOCKBIT's website. Don't do crime. Crime is bad. XOXO from Prague. The EVEREST and the LOCKBIT breach weren't separate incidents. They were connected. The exact same message appeared in both attacks. Don't do crime. Crime is bad. XOXO from Prague. This wasn't a coincidence. Think about what this means. One entity, whether a lone hacker or a small team, successfully infiltrated and exposed two of the craziest cybercriminal organizations in the world. Groups that had evaded international law enforcement for years fell to some rando called Prague within weeks of each other. Was Prague a rival ransomware group eliminating competition? A vigilante with personal grudges against these crews? A nation-state actor cleaning house? Former victims getting revenge? I've talked to security experts who believe Prague could be a former insider. Let me know in the comments if you think the same. Prague showed the world that behind their fearsome operations were sloppy operators using weak passwords and unpatched systems. And whoever Prague is, they've accomplished something remarkable. Thank you, Prague. But the fight was far from over. Look at LOCKBIT after Operation Kronos. You'd think getting raided by the FBI and having their servers seized would put them out of business, right? In May 2024, just 3 months after the takedown, they launched 191 new attacks. That's not a group that's backing down. After the May 2025 breach by Prague, LOCKBIT Sup himself posted on Tox, "I'm already working on getting back to work. LOCKBIT alone has hit over 2,000 victims across 70 countries." They've targeted hospitals where people literally couldn't get treatment because systems were locked up. Law enforcement has been fighting back, but these criminals operate from safe havens with complex infrastructure. They use cryptocurrency for untraceable payments. They hide behind anonymous networks. They're sophisticated, ruthless, and they think they're untouchable. But it's not all bad news. In February 2025, law enforcement hit the infrastructure supporting these ransomware groups. The US Treasury Department sanctioned 2 major providers, Z Servers and X-Host. These infrastructure providers are the backbone that ransomware operations depend on. They supply the server hosting, domain registrations, and technical resources these criminal groups need to operate. Cut them off and you start to choke the whole ecosystem. Meanwhile, the hunt for Prague continues. As of May 9th, 2025, authorities have found no trace of the vigilante hacker. The identical messages left on both EVEREST and LOCKBIT systems suggest this hacker isn't done either. Whichever one of you is Prague, let me know in the comments.
Of likely Russian origin.
Targeted by suspected Russian hackers.
One of the world's most sophisticated international cybercrime operations.
There's a war you can't see fought on keyboards, where hackers like Russia's APT-29, aka Cozy Bear, are at the center. They don't need bombs to destabilize nations. They use tools like WineLoader to slip into systems and pull strings from afar. You're about to see how they target diplomats and politicians, all without leaving a trace. Cozy Bear isn't just any hacker group. They're linked directly to Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service. These are the same people behind the SolarWinds attack that compromised US government systems in 2020. But now they've evolved. Their newest weapon? WineLoader. It's a backdoor, a hidden passage into a computer system that lets them come and go as they please. What makes WineLoader special is its modular design. It has multiple tools and has one for each of the hacker's needs: stealing files, monitoring communications, or mapping out networks. The stakes here go far beyond stolen passwords or credit card numbers. This is about political power, about who controls information during elections, about who knows what diplomats are saying behind closed doors, who's really pulling the strings in global politics. As you'll see, sometimes it's not the people giving speeches on TV. It's the invisible operators with access to their emails, their schedules, their strategic plans. It all started with a simple PDF invitation. July 2023. European diplomats receive an elegant invitation to a wine tasting event supposedly hosted by the Indian ambassador. The PDF looks legitimate, created in LibreOffice, professionally formatted, personally addressed. One click on the embedded link takes them to what looks like a harmless questionnaire. But that click just compromised national security. Behind the scenes, that link downloads a zip file containing hidden code. This code, an HTA file, reaches out to a server and downloads what appears to be just text. This isn't random text, though. It's base 64, a way to disguise executable code as innocent-looking characters. When decoded, this text transforms into another zip file that extracts two critical components, SQL writer, EX, E, and V. See runtime 140.dll. This is where the magic happens. The SQL writer.exe file is legitimate Windows software, but the VC runtime DLL is pure malware. Windows trusts the legitimate program and runs the malicious DLL alongside it, a technique called DLL sideloading. WineLoader is now in, silent, invisible, waiting. Diplomats across Europe got fully owned. Their systems were now open books to Russian intelligence. Fast forward to January 30th, 2024. Cybersecurity firm Zscaler notices something strange. Another wave of PDF invitations hits diplomats in the Czech Republic, Germany, and India. Same wine-tasting theme, same malicious techniques, but more sophisticated. This time, WineLoader gets sneakier, but I'll explain that later. All this travels through encrypted channels to servers controlled by the hackers. The compromised systems become puppets, waiting for instructions from their masters. But Cozy Bear wasn't done. Their targets were about to get much more politically significant. Late February 2024. German political parties start receiving phishing emails. These aren't wine invitations anymore. They're dinner invitations, supposedly from the Christian Democratic Union, Germany's second largest political party. The stakes just got higher, much higher. These emails link to pages dropping a new tool, Rootsaw. The target isn't random. The CDU is a political powerhouse in Germany. APT29 were positioning themselves to potentially influence European elections. The phishing emails arrived disguised as dinner invitations, supposedly from the CDU itself. Party officials click the links, expecting to see event details. Instead, they're connecting to servers that deliver Rootsaw, a specialized delivery tool also known as Envy Scout. Rootsaw does one job: prepare the system for WineLoader installation. Once it's in, WineLoader takes over. I've studied the code. Rootsaw shares distinctive traits with other APT29 tools like Burn Batter, Miski Beat, and Beat Drop. Same developers, same playbook, new targets. This is why cybersecurity experts fear Cozy Bear. One wrong move here and Europe's stability hangs in the balance. This isn't just about Germany. The CDU helps shape EU policy, international relations, and economic decisions affecting millions. Most victims have no idea they've been compromised. The malware sits silently, collecting, mapping out the entire organization from the inside. By the time you detect APT29, they've already been inside for months. WineLoader doesn't stop. It keeps running. After compromising the CDU, WineLoader doesn't just grab what it needs and leave. It sets up shop. It will stay there forever unless you remove it. What makes this tool so difficult to detect and remove is its architecture. WineLoader is built on a modular design. Think of it as a platform that can load different tools for different jobs. The core malware stays small and simple, then downloads exactly what it needs for specific tasks. Today, it might grab emails. Tomorrow, it could take screenshots. Next week, it might steal credentials. The hackers can swap these capabilities in and out without ever replacing the main program. The second brilliant feature is how it hides its communications. WineLoader uses RC4 encryption with a massive 256-byte key to scramble every message it sends to its command servers. The encryption doesn't just protect the data. It encrypts the strings in memory, then re-encrypts them after use for extra stealth. If you're monitoring network traffic, you'll just see normal-looking web requests. With a 256-byte key, it's mathematically impossible to crack, unless we had a quantum computer. But anyway, the true genius is in how WineLoader integrates with Windows. When your computer runs a trusted program, Windows automatically loads support files called DLLs. WineLoader replaces one of these files, VC runtime 140.dll, with a malicious version. Your system thinks it's loading a legitimate support file, but it's actually running APT29's code. To make sure it stays around, WineLoader sets up persistence. It creates a scheduled task called MSSQ, L writer that's disguised as SQ, L server V, SS writer, 64-bit, a legitimate Windows component, or it adds a registry key. Either way, every time your system boots up, WineLoader wakes up too. The servers it talks to look innocuous. Nothing in these domain names screams Russian intelligence. They look like normal business websites. This is why WineLoader remains active even now. Cybersecurity teams can find and block specific instances, but the toolkit keeps evolving. The same basic architecture gets tweaked, repackaged, redeployed. Even with the technical details public, defending against it remains challenging. When APT29 gets inside your network, they aren't visitors. They're new residents, and they've designed WineLoader to be the perfect house guest. One you never notice is there, one that will destroy you. Check out the links in the description if you want to keep yourself safe. WineLoader outsmarts the system every time. You've seen how it spreads. You've seen what it targets. Now let me show you why it's nearly impossible to catch. Every 2 minutes, like clockwork, WineLoader phones home. It sends HTTP GET requests to servers like the ones I showed you before. These aren't normal web requests. They carry hidden data in the body. A campaign ID, your username, your machine name, your IP address, all packed into specific bite-sized chunks. The traffic looks legitimate. It uses a Firefox browser signature. Nothing suspicious there, just another browser request. But its most brilliant trick is DLL hollowing. WineLoader doesn't just hide in your system. It hides inside legitimate Windows files. It injects its code directly into random DLL, replacing parts of real system files. It avoids the obvious ones that might get checked, targeting the thousands of other DLLs Windows never scrutinizes, and it leaves no evidence. After each operation, WineLoader uses memory zeroing, wiping every buffer it uses. It's like a burglar who not only wears gloves, but mops the floor after they're done. Your standard security tools are looking for leftovers, fingerprints, traces, but there are none. WineLoader isn't gone. It's still active. APT29 is still deploying it with minor modifications. The campaign against European diplomats and German political parties continues. The true danger of WineLoader isn't just what it steals, it's that you never know it was there. Welcome to the Hacker Gallery. I'm the operator, and today we're diving into the world of Turla. This Russian hacking crew has been around since 1996. That's nearly 3 decades of digital espionage, hitting targets that would make your head spin. The Pentagon, NASA, even NATO itself. When governments whisper about the threats that keep them up at night, Turla is high on that list. You might hear them called by other names: Secret Blizzard, Waterbug, Venomous Bear, Snake. Different masks, same actors. The U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, pins them directly to Center 16 of Russia's FSB. When cybersecurity experts talk about attribution, tracing attacks back to their source, Turla makes it exceptionally difficult. They hide their tracks, use sophisticated malware, and even hijack other hackers' infrastructure to mask their operations. Between 2022 and 2024, something changed. Turla got bolder, sneakier. Their techniques evolved in ways that should concern everyone who values their digital privacy, which, in 2025, should be all of us. This isn't just about stolen emails or compromised passwords. This is about control. It's about nations using the internet as a battlefield, with every connected device a potential target or weapon. And in this new kind of war, Turla has positioned itself as one of the most dangerous players. By the end of this story, you'll understand why this digital war affects you, whether you work in cybersecurity or just check your email on your phone. Because in Turla's game of digital chess, even pawns have value. And right now, you might be one of those pawns. In November 2022, Turla didn't just hack. They hacked other hackers. Welcome back to the gallery. I'm the operator, and what I'm about to show you changes everything we thought we knew about cyber espionage. There's this Pakistani hacking group called Storm 0156. They go by other names like Side Copy and Transparent Tribe. And they've broken into Afghan and Indian government networks in the past. Their fingerprints are all over Afghanistan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the General Directorate of Intelligence, foreign consulates, and India's military networks. Then Turla arrives. Operating under their Microsoft-assigned name, Secret Blizzard, they identify Storm 0156's infrastructure, and instead of starting from scratch, they simply hijack it. Not just 1 or 2 servers, 33 of them. Think about the servers humming in dark rooms somewhere. Status lights blinking, as Turla's code silently overwrites Storm 0156's systems. It's like watching a hunter become the hunted. Microsoft confirmed. Secret Blizzard used Storm 0156's infrastructure to deploy their own backdoors, including Tiny Turla and 2-, on already compromised networks. Once inside, Turla deploys a full arsenal of custom malware. First comes Tiny Turla, a lightweight backdoor that maintains persistence through a simple batch file and registry keys named delay, key, and hosts. To install Tiny Turla, they use a technique called DLL, sideloading. They take Windows Credential Wizard program, rename it, and pair it with a malicious version of duser.dll. When the computer runs what it thinks is a legitimate program, it loads Turla's malicious code instead. The system literally invites the intruder in. They also deploy 2-, a .NET-based backdoor that surveys infected systems and steals data. Using a technique called search order hijacking, they place a malicious OCI.dll in the Windows System 32 folder, where the computer will find it before the legitimate version. A good analogy to explain what they did is replacing a trusted security guard with an imposter in the same uniform. But wait, it gets crazier. In India, Storm 0156 had physically planted devices called Wi-Fi pineapples on military networks. These small gadgets, about the size of a router, can intercept all network traffic passing through them. Turla takes control of these physical implants through the servers they've hijacked. Imagine Indian military personnel sending what they think are secure communications, while these small devices silently copy everything passing through them and send it to Turla. Physical spy gear, planted by one hacker group, controlled by another. That's not just digital espionage, that's a heist movie plot. They also deploy StatuEasy, a clipboard monitor that logs everything users copy and paste, saving it to temporary files for later theft. And Mini Pocket, a TCP-based downloader with hard-coded IP addresses and ports to retrieve additional malware. Their domain infrastructure includes these ones I'm showing you on screen, registered in April 2022 and February 2023. These innocent-looking web addresses hide their command channels. In May 2023, the FBI and intelligence agencies from the Five Eyes Alliance, that's the US, UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, launch Operation Medusa. Their target, Turla's Snake malware. Snake had been Turla's crown jewel since 2004, stealing secrets from governments, NATO allies, research organizations, and journalists across 50 countries. What made Snake special was its peer-to-peer botnet structure. Infected computers could talk directly to each other without always connecting to a central server, making it harder to detect and disrupt. The FBI develops Perseus, a tool that can establish communication sessions with snake-infected computers and send them a self-destruct command. The brilliant part? Perseus removes Snake without damaging the host computer or legitimate applications. For a moment, it seems like Turla might be on the back foot. But they're not done. Not even close. By mid-2023, Turla goes even deeper into Storm 0156's operations. They gain access to Storm 0156's own workstations, essentially hacking the hackers' personal computers. From there, they steal Storm 0156's entire toolkit. Crimson Rat, a .NET-based remote access tool that gathers system information and logs keystrokes, capturing every password and message typed. Wainscot, a Go-based remote access tool that works on both Windows and Linux systems, giving complete remote control of infected machines. They also grab credentials and sensitive data. Storm 0156 had already stolen from Indian military targets, a thief stealing from another thief. What makes this particularly interesting is that other hackers often can't use modern security tools to protect themselves. Nation-state and cybercriminal endpoints and malware are especially vulnerable to exploitation because of this. But this is just the setup. As 2023 turns to 2024, Turla sets their sights on a new target, one that will take their cyber operations from the digital realm straight to the front lines of a hot war. And no one sees it coming. In early 2024, Turla crossed a line that few hackers have ever dared. From March to April 2024, Turla took aim at Ukrainian military devices using Starlink. This isn't some random target. Starlink, Elon Musk's satellite internet service, has been crucial for Ukrainian forces on the front lines. Microsoft observed secret Blizzard downloading their custom reconnaissance or survey tool, selectively deployed to devices of further interest by the threat actor. For example, devices egressing from Starlink IP addresses, a common signature of Ukrainian frontline military devices. Think about what this means. Ukrainian soldiers in trenches, coordinating movements, requesting support, sharing intelligence, all while Turla silently watches, recording everything, reporting back to Moscow. For this operation, Turla didn't work alone. They leveraged the Amade botnet, that's version 4.18, also known as Storm 1919. A botnet is essentially a network of infected computers that work together under remote control. This particular one checks victim systems for antivirus software like Avast, Avira, Kaspersky, and EC before deploying its payloads. They also borrowed tools from another hacker group called Storm 1837. This is becoming Turla's signature move. Why build your own tools when you can steal someone else's? The attack started with classic phishing. Emails with malicious attachments or links that, when clicked, begin the infection process. Once inside, they deployed multiple specialized tools. First came TavDig, a lightweight backdoor delivered through PowerShell scripts. TavDig establishes that critical first foothold, like securing a beachhead before landing the main invasion force. Then, Kazuar Phi 2, an advanced backdoor that hides itself inside legitimate processes like Explorer.exe or Opera.exe. This is called process injection, and it's particularly troubling. Your task manager shows normal Windows processes running, but hidden inside is Turla's malware, stealing data and executing commands. They also deployed Cookbox, a PowerShell backdoor originally developed by Storm 1837 to maintain persistent access to infected systems. For reconnaissance, they used a tool called DDRA.exe that communicates using RC4 encryption. This encryption secures their communications, making it much harder for defenders to detect what information is being stolen. Their command and control infrastructure. The servers that receive stolen data and send instructions to the malware operated through seemingly innocent websites with domains that looked like regular websites to casual observers, but serve as the nerve center of Turla's operation. In previous campaigns, Turla stole diplomatic secrets or research data, important but abstract. Now, their operations could directly influence who lives and who dies on the battlefield. When we talk about the future of conflict, this is it. Right here. Right now. The soldier with the rifle remains on the front line, but behind them stands a new kind of warrior. They've moved beyond mere espionage into something far more immediate and dangerous, directly supporting battlefield operations in an active war zone. You see, it's increasingly about who controls the flow of information, and Turla has just demonstrated that they're a formidable power indeed. The Starlink attack made headlines, but Turla didn't vanish after that big hit. They just changed tactics. That's what makes these guys so dangerous. They adapt. They evolve. Starting around October 2023, months before the Ukraine operation, Turla began shifting their tool set. Microsoft's threat intelligence team confirmed it. Since October 2023, Secret Blizzard has increasingly relied on 2dash and Statueasy in their operations, possibly to counter detection efforts. 2dash, that .NET backdoor we saw earlier, became their go-to tool. Remember, it's the one that lets them run remote commands, steal data, and survey infected devices. They first deployed it in November 2022, but by October 2023, they were using it everywhere. Same with Statueasy, their clipboard monitor. This nasty piece of work silently logs everything you copy and paste, saving it to temporary files for later theft. Every password, every bit of text, every piece of sensitive information, captured without you knowing. Luckily for you, major internet service providers null route traffic from known Turla infrastructure. That means they essentially create a digital dead end, where all traffic trying to reach Turla's servers hits a brick wall. But Turla's seen this playbook before. In 2019, they hijacked tools from an Iranian hacker group called Oil Rig. In 2022, they leveraged infrastructure from a botnet called Andromeda. Every time defenders close one door, Turla finds an open window. Think about what this means. Operation Medusa took down their snake malware. But by October, Turla was already pivoting hard to other tools. I can hear you asking, why does this matter? Because most hackers go quiet. When they're burned, they retreat, lick their wounds, maybe even disappear for a while. Not Turla. They just find new ways in, new tools to use, new infrastructure to hide behind. That's why they're still active in 2025. The technical fingerprints are clear. That 2dash tool I mentioned? Security researchers track it by its unique hash that I'm showing on screen. That's like a digital fingerprint that lets them identify it no matter where it shows up. And it keeps showing up. So, here's where Turla's story leaves us. With a hard, uncomfortable truth. Look at your phone right now. That device you're checking dozens, maybe hundreds of times a day? It's a potential intelligence gathering tool. And state-sponsored hackers like Turla are masters at turning it against you. Think about what we've seen, and you think you're not on their radar? Every time you open an email attachment without checking, every time you click a suspicious link, every time you use the same password across multiple sites, you're creating an opportunity. Picture this. You're sitting at home, your phone buzzes with a notification. Looks normal. You tap it. In that second, without any sign, without any warning, malware, similar to what Turla used on Ukrainian military systems, begins harvesting your data, your contacts, your location. Maybe it activates your microphone during sensitive conversations, all while showing you nothing but your regular apps, working as expected. This isn't science fiction. This is exactly how advanced persistent threats operate. When they lost snake malware to Operation Medusa, they doubled down on 2dash and Statue Easy. They don't need to win every battle. They just need to find one way in. And they've been doing this since 1996. That's longer than me. I've shown you their techniques. I've shown you their targets. But what I can't show you is who their next target will be. So make sure to subscribe if you want to find out. The next time your phone buzzes with a notification, I want you to pause, just for a second, and ask yourself, did Turla just use a zero-click vulnerability on me? On a chilly September morning, a Ukrainian recruit tapped download on an app that swore it'd keep him off the front lines, only to hand him over to the enemy. Welcome to the Hacker Gallery. I'm the operator, and today we're diving into a cyber trap that springs from the darkest corners of human fear. It's 2024, and Ukraine's military mobilization laws have tightened. The draft net widens, pulling in more citizens as the conflict with Russia grinds on. For many Ukrainians, conscription isn't just inconvenient, it's potentially fatal. The desperation to avoid the front lines is real, but sadly it's ripe for exploitation. Enter UNC 5812, a Russian military hacking squad. They've crafted something insidious, an app called Sunspinner. Its promise is simple and seductive. Download this and stay off the battlefield. Safety at the tap of a screen. But as you might have guessed it, Sunspinner isn't helping them. And all it takes is one desperate tap on download to spring the trap. Sunspinner wasn't a lifeline. It was a loaded gun pointed at Ukraine's recruits. The Russians didn't rush this operation. Back in April 2024, someone from UNC 5812 registered the domain civildefense.com.ua. 5 months of waiting, planning, preparing. That's patience with purpose. By early September, they launched their Telegram channel, followed by the website. The infrastructure was set. The trap was ready. What these Ukrainian recruits thought they were downloading was a tool to keep them off the battlefield. What they actually got was malware, with 2 distinct strains. For Windows users, Sunspinner delivered Prancis Loader, a piece of malware designed to do one thing: bring in more dangerous software. Think of Prancis Loader as a delivery guy dropping off your pizza, but at the same time letting in criminals through the back. This loader immediately deployed Pure Stealer, commercial-grade info-stealing malware that costs $150 a month, or $699 for a lifetime license on the dark web. This thing hunts through your device, capturing browser passwords, cryptocurrency wallet details, email logins, and messaging app credentials. One click, and everything you've secured is suddenly exposed. Android users got hit with CracksRat, a remote access Trojan that turns your phone into a surveillance device against you. Once installed, UNC 5812 operators could track your location, log your keystrokes, record your conversations, access your text messages, and harvest every credential you type. Your most personal device, your phone, the thing you're glued to, is now a valuable asset to Russian agents. What you saw on screen was completely different from what was happening behind it. Sunspinner showed you fake maps, claiming to show safe zones away from recruitment officers. Meanwhile, it was quietly connecting to command and control servers at IPs like these two. These servers function as the operations headquarters, sending instructions to the malware and collecting everything it steals. The technical skill was matched with psychological manipulation. UNC 5812 flooded their Telegram channel with anti-mobilization content, urging recruits to submit videos of unfair drafts. They encouraged Ukrainians to inform on their own military, while simultaneously feeding them pro-Russian propaganda. But the most insidious part? The attackers created tutorial videos teaching victims how to disable Google Play Protect, Android's built-in security system. The websites frequently asked questions, even justified distributing apps outside official stores as necessary for anonymity and security. The cruel irony: victims were taught to dismantle their own defenses. This wasn't just a malware campaign. It was horrific human exploitation. UNC 5812 understood that fear makes better victims than curiosity. The operation was gaining momentum through September 2024. Each download strengthened Russia's intelligence position. Each compromised device became another set of eyes and ears behind Ukrainian lines. September 18th, 2024. This was the day UNC 5812 were ready for the kill shot. The Russian operators leveraged a Ukrainian missile alerts Telegram channel, a critical safety resource followed by over 80,000 people desperate for information that might save their lives. In wartime, these alerts may be the only thing between life and death. When your phone buzzes with a missile alert, you look immediately. You trust implicitly. UNC 5812 exploited that trust perfectly. In one strategic move, they'd placed their trap before tens of thousands of potential victims. By this point, the malware ecosystem was fully operational. Every new download of Sunspinner unleashed Pransys Loader on Windows machines, which immediately deployed Pure Stealer to harvest credentials. On Android devices, Cracksrat gave Russian operators live access to location data, messages, microphones, and cameras. UNC 5812 now had eyes and ears inside the phones and computers of Ukrainian military recruits. They could see their locations. They could read their messages. They could access their banking details. They could monitor their movements. They could eavesdrop on conversations. They were harvesting intelligence at an unprecedented scale. September 18th wasn't just another day in this campaign. It was the moment UNC 5812 revealed the true scope of their ambition. When a cyber operation reaches 80,000 potential victims in a war zone, it's no longer just a hack. Google's crew sounded the alarm and swung back hard. When you're running one of the largest tech companies on Earth, you better notice when someone starts weaponizing your platforms. Google's threat intelligence team picked up the scent and moved into action. First move: update, play, protect. This built-in security system scans apps on Android devices, and Google enhanced it specifically to detect Cracksrat and its variants. Next, they added that website I showed you before and other malicious domains to safe browsing. A security feature built into Chrome that warns users when they're about to visit dangerous websites. Red flags would now pop up when anyone tried to access these domains, blocking the primary infection vector. Remember those tutorial videos teaching users how to install Sunspinner? They weren't just installation guides. They were sabotage manuals. Step by step, they walked victims through the process of disabling Google Play Protect and manually granting permissions that no legitimate app would ever need. Turn off Play Protect to ensure your privacy, the videos urged. Grant these permissions to avoid detection by recruitment officers. It was clever. By the time Google deployed their countermeasures, thousands of Ukrainian recruits had already dismantled their own security systems. That's the brutal reality Google faced. Their technical response was solid, but the UNC 5812 campaign had built psychological manipulation directly into their attack vector. For every device where a user had followed those tutorial videos, Google's countermeasures were useless. This is why modern cybersecurity professionals talk about defense in depth. Technical solutions alone aren't enough when attackers target the human layer. You need user education. You need security awareness training. The campaign that began with a domain registration back in April had survived detection and countermeasures. This isn't surprising to anyone who studies Russia's cyber warfare playbook. Sunspinner isn't an isolated incident. It's just one small part of a larger operation aimed at destabilizing Ukraine, especially following those 2024 mobilization law changes that intensified conscription efforts. The Center for Strategic and International Studies has documented this pattern extensively. Russia deploys cyber operations alongside kinetic warfare, creating a multi-dimensional battlefield where propaganda, espionage, and destruction blend seamlessly. Pure Stealer and Cracksrat aren't cutting-edge tools. They're commercially available malware. The command and control infrastructure isn't particularly novel. The distribution methods aren't revolutionary. So what makes it devastating? It's that UNC 5812 identified a universal human need, safety, and weaponized it. This pattern repeats across Russian cyber operations. These hybrid threats form part of a broader narrative of Russian cyber aggression, one where technical exploits and human manipulation work in tandem to achieve military objectives. The Sunspinner campaign reminds us that in modern warfare, there's no clear line between the digital and physical battlefield. They're the same war, fought with different weapons. And while bombs and bullets target troops, malware and disinformation target something arguably worse. As October continues and winter approaches in Ukraine, UNC 5812's operators haven't gone anywhere. They're watching, waiting, planning. When the next campaign launches, and it will launch, it may not be called Sunspinner. If you want to know what it is, consider subscribing and I'll let you know as soon as I see it in my logs. In 2015, Russian hackers breached the heart of German democracy, stealing secrets straight from Chancellor Angela Merkel's email. Welcome to the Hacker Gallery. I'm the operator, and today we're tracking APT-28, one of the most sophisticated hacking groups on Earth. Their story begins not with small targets, but with one of the most powerful political figures in Europe. For weeks in April and May of 2015, a team of hackers linked to Russia's military intelligence systematically infiltrated the German federal parliament, the Bundestag. This wasn't random. This wasn't opportunistic. This was precision. They didn't waste time on low-value targets. They went straight for Chancellor Merkel's inbox. When you compromise the communications of a world leader, you're making a statement. APT-28, also known as Fancy Bear, likely used spear phishing to gain entry. Unlike regular phishing that casts a wide net, spear phishing targets specific individuals with customized, convincing emails designed to trick them into revealing credentials or installing malware. One click from the right person is all it takes. The attack was devastating. A significant amount of data was stolen and the parliament's operations were disrupted for days. Think about that. One of Europe's most powerful governments, partially paralyzed by keystrokes from Moscow. But the Bundestag hack wasn't a one-time operation. It's simply part of a worldwide campaign targeting governments, elections, and even you. Germany was just the appetizer. APT, 28's appetite grew. The thing about elite hacker groups is they don't hit once and disappear. They evolve, they escalate, and that's exactly what APT-28 did after breaching Merkel's email. In 2016, they set their sights on an even bigger target: the US presidential election. APT-28 infiltrated the Democratic National Committee and the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee months before Americans would head to the polls. Their weapon of choice? Again, spear-phishing emails crafted to look legitimate, tricking staffers into clicking malicious links. Once inside, they deployed sophisticated malware tools. X-Agent, a digital spy that records every keystroke, captures screenshots, and steals files directly from your computer. X-Tunnel, which creates secure encrypted channels to silently extract all that stolen data. After gaining access to the DCCC network, they discovered a user who also had DNC credentials. Think about that. One set of stolen credentials unlocked multiple networks. Security professionals call this lateral movement, using compromised credentials to hop from one system to another. Next, they didn't just steal the information, they weaponized it. On June 15, 2016, between 4:19 and 4:56 p.m. Moscow time, and yes, we know the exact time frame, APT-28 operators were hurriedly researching English phrases to create a blog post for a fictitious persona, Guccifer 2.0. This fake Romanian hacker claimed responsibility for the DNC hack, but it was a classic disinformation operation run directly from Russia. They leaked the stolen documents through dcleaks.com and the Guccifer 2.0 persona, carefully timing releases for maximum political impact. To cover their tracks, they routed communications through global proxy servers and paid for infrastructure using cryptocurrency. This wasn't just a hack. It was a coordinated influence operation targeting American democracy itself. But APT-28 was far from finished. By April 2018, their ambitions had grown beyond political targets. US and UK authorities issued a joint alert. Russian hackers, including APT-28, were now targeting home and enterprise routers worldwide. These compromised routers weren't just being hacked. They were being transformed into surveillance tools for man-in-the-middle attacks. This technique allows hackers to secretly position themselves between two communicating parties, intercepting or even altering the information passing between them without either side knowing. Your router, the device that connects everything in your home to the internet, was now potentially a Russian listening post. The situation escalated dramatically in 2022. APT-28 began hijacking Ubiquiti Edge routers globally, particularly targeting governments and military organizations across the US, Ukraine, and Poland. What makes this phase especially cunning is they didn't start from scratch. They repurposed an existing botnet called MuBot, originally created by common cybercriminals who installed it on devices with default passwords. APT-28 essentially stole a tool from other hackers and upgraded it for sophisticated espionage. To expand their access, they exploited a zero-day vulnerability in Microsoft Outlook, CVE 2023-23397. A zero-day is a security hole unknown to the software maker, meaning there's no patch or protection available. This particular flaw allowed them to steal what's called NTLM v2 digests, hashed passwords used in Windows authentication systems. Using specialized tools with names like Impacket, NTLM Relay, X.py, and Responder, they redirected these stolen credentials to servers they controlled, gaining access to victims' accounts and networks. What I'm essentially saying is, if you had this router public-facing, the hackers might have used it as part of their espionage attacks, Scary to think about. Anyway, as you're about to see, APT-28 were about to face their first major setback. After years of watching APT-28 run rampant across global networks, the FBI launched what might be the most aggressive counter-hack operation in recent history. They called it Operation Dying Ember. The target? That massive network of compromised ubiquity edge routers. Hundreds of them. That APT-28 had been using as their personal spy platform. These Russian military hackers had built this enormous web of compromised devices spanning continents. And on February 15, 2024, the FBI pulled the plug on all of it. The FBI didn't just shut down the botnet. They completely flipped the script. They remotely accessed these infected routers and used MooBot, the very same malware that APT-28 had installed, against its creators. The FBI took the hacker's own code, rewired it, and used it to delete the stolen data and malicious files APT-28 had planted. That's like stealing someone's weapon and using it to destroy their base. Lol, anyway. What exactly is a botnet? It's a network of infected devices, in this case, routers, all controlled remotely by hackers. These botnets act like a digital army following commands from a central server. APT-28 had taken this MooBot botnet, originally created by regular cyber criminals, and enhanced it with their own sophisticated tools for espionage. So what did the FBI do to kick them out? Well, they modified firewall rules on these routers, basically changing the gates that determine what can enter or leave, to completely block the GRU from regaining access. They also discovered that APT-28 had replaced legitimate system files on these routers with sophisticated Trojans. For example, they swapped out the legitimate SSH program. That's the secure shell software used for remote administration, with a counterfeit version downloaded from this malicious website. This gave them persistent control, even if someone tried to clean their system. Routers went dark across multiple countries. Command lines stopped responding to APT-28's control servers. Data pipelines suddenly closed. For the GRU operators sitting at their keyboards, it must have felt like losing a relative or something traumatic like that. The FBI was telling APT-28, "We see you. We understand how you operate, and we can take it all away." Operation Dying Ember was offensive cybersecurity in action. But let's be real. As impressive as Operation Dying Ember was, this wasn't the end of APT-28. Far from it. This was just one battle in an ongoing cyber war right now. The Russians are skilled, patient, and persistent. They'd been adapting for years. One operation, however successful, wasn't going to put them out of business. Don't go anywhere, because I'm about to show you how APT-28 was already preparing for their next move. APT-28 barely missed a beat. In December 2023, just before the FBI's Operation Dying Ember, APT-28 had already deployed something new and insidious: MACE-Pi. Now, MACE-Pi is a custom Python backdoor, a secret passage into computer systems that lets hackers run any command they want. Think about having complete remote control of someone's computer. That's what MACE-Pi delivers. Those compromised edge routers we've been talking about? The routers didn't have MACE-Pi installed on them. Instead, they served as relay stations. MACE-Pi infected the actual target computers, government systems, military networks, corporate infrastructure. Then, those infected machines connected to the compromised edge routers, which passed commands from APT-28 and sent stolen data back to them. By February 27, 2024, just 12 days after the FBI's takedown operation, the FBI and their allies were already issuing a new joint advisory warning about APT-28's ongoing router exploits. Think about that timeline. The FBI knocks out their botnet on February 15, and less than 2 weeks later, they're warning about new threats from the same group. If you want the technical details, well, what makes Mace Pi particularly slick is its compact design. It's not a bulky, obvious program. It's lean, efficient, and deadly. APT-28 encrypted their communications with a 16-character AES key. That's military-grade encryption that scrambles data, so even if it's intercepted, it looks like random garbage without the special key to decode it. And remember, they're operating with the protection of the Russian government. They're military intelligence professionals with state resources, training, and immunity from prosecution as long as they stay in Russia. There's something extra cool I want to quickly show you. The hackers had this specialized Python script designed for one purpose: stealing webmail credentials from specific high-value targets. The script, buried deep in the victim's router's file system at home/user/srv/core.py, was a masterpiece. It validated credentials harvested through two sophisticated techniques: cross-site scripting and browser-in-the-browser phishing. Cross-site scripting is when hackers inject malicious code into legitimate websites. When you visit that site, the code runs in your browser without your knowledge, stealing information or redirecting you to fake pages. Browser-in-the-browser phishing creates perfect fake login windows that look identical to the real thing, even showing the correct URL in the address bar. It's practically impossible to spot the difference. APT-28 truly shows their brilliance by integrating something called API.anticaptcha.com into their attack chain. You know those prove your human tests with the distorted text or the click all the traffic lights challenges? That's CAPTCHA, a security measure specifically designed to stop automated attacks. APT-28 simply outsourced the problem. They connected to a commercial service that uses low-cost human labor to solve these challenges in real time. And they could do all this because they had root privileges on these routers. Complete administrative control of the entire Linux-based system. Nothing was off-limits. From Merkel's email in 2015 to automated CAPTCHA-solving credential theft, APT-28 has continuously gotten better, improved countermeasures, and expanded their capabilities. When you're logging into your email tomorrow, remember this. Somewhere in Russia, in an unmarked building, highly trained military hackers are perfecting ways to bypass every security measure between them and their target. And that is why I suggest you use a secure email service that protects your privacy like Proton Mail. Link in the description if you want to check it out. This is The Operator, signing off from the Hacker Gallery. In 2020, a routine software update became a national security crisis. Thousands of organizations, including the U.S. Treasury and Commerce departments, got hit in a cyber attack so bold it shook the world. The SolarWinds attack. Welcome to the Hacker Gallery. I'm the Operator, and today I'm taking you inside one of the most sophisticated cyber attacks in history. Let me introduce you to APT-29, also known as Cozy Bear, Nobelium, or the Dukes. They're elite cyber operatives linked directly to Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, the SVR. They've been breaking into government networks worldwide since at least 2014. This is the digital equivalent of special forces. What made the SolarWinds attack different was its method. Instead of directly targeting victims, APT-29 compromised SolarWinds itself, a trusted software provider. They slipped malicious code called Sunburst into legitimate software updates. When organizations installed what they thought were routine patches, they were actually installing a backdoor. This is what we call a supply chain attack. You can't break into a fortress directly? Fine. Just poison the supplies they trust and let them bring you inside themselves. Once inside, APT-29 moved through networks using stolen credentials, basically grabbing passwords and access keys to hop from system to system. Before anyone noticed, they had compromised over 18,000 organizations globally. Think about that scale for a second. 18,000 organizations, including the heart of US government systems. This isn't just hacking. It's cyber warfare, sanctioned by a superpower, targeting the systems you rely on every day. The digital Cold War isn't coming. It's already here. And the most chilling part? This is just the beginning of the story. SolarWinds was only the start. APT-29 had been hiding in networks for years, and they were just getting warmed up. Let me take you back to mid-2019. While the world was unaware, APT-29 had already launched what security researchers would later call the Stellar Particle Campaign. It's fascinating and terrifying what they achieved here. They deployed two particularly nasty pieces of malware. First was GoldMax, a Linux backdoor that ensured persistence. What's persistence? It's making sure your malware stays active even when systems restart. They used what's called a cron tab with an @reboot line, essentially telling the system run this again immediately if someone restarts the computer. They hid it as a legitimate file in a hidden directory where admins rarely look. Their second tool, Trailblazer, was even more insidious. It used Windows Management Instrumentation, WMI for short, to create event subscriptions. Think of these as silent triggers that automatically run malicious code whenever certain system events happen. The clever part? Trailblazer disguised its communications back to APT-29 servers as Google notifications. Your security team sees normal Google traffic, but it's actually hackers commanding your systems. One organization had APT-29 sitting in their network for 2 years without detecting them. 2 years. Imagine finding out Russian state hackers had been reading your emails and documents since 2019, and you only discovered them in 2021. That happened. I need to pause here because this detail is particularly disturbing. APT-29 specifically targeted internal wikis, the knowledge repositories where organizations document their software, architecture, network designs, and even known vulnerabilities. They were literally reading the instruction manuals for the systems they were attacking. By early 2022, APT-29 had evolved their tactics. They launched a spear phishing campaign targeting diplomats in NATO, the EU, and African countries. Unlike mass phishing, spear phishing is precisely targeted. They used compromised embassy email accounts to send what looked like legitimate policy updates. When diplomats clicked these emails, they weren't just downloading attachments. The hackers used a technique called HTML smuggling, hiding malicious files inside seemingly innocent web code. These files contained a tool called BeatDrop that ran entirely in memory, leaving minimal traces. And here's the jaw-dropping part. BeatDrop used Atlassian Trello, a legitimate project management platform, to receive commands. They turned everyday business tools into weapons. Once inside, they deployed Cobalt Strike Beacon, a tool designed for security testing but repurposed for attacks. With it, they could move laterally through networks in just 12 hours. By mid-2022, APT-29 was targeting Microsoft 365 accounts in NATO countries. They'd disable the Purview audit feature, essentially turning off the security cameras before breaking in. They used brute force attacks to guess credentials for unused accounts. then enrolled those accounts in multi-factor authentication to maintain access. They even used Azure virtual machines with Microsoft IP addresses to blend their attack traffic with legitimate Microsoft traffic. Imagine trying to spot the intruder when they look exactly like the security guard. In July 2022, they switched to an even more sophisticated tool called Brute Ratel. While Cobalt Strike was well known to security teams, Brute Ratel was designed specifically to evade modern detection systems. Its badgers, similar to beacons, would hide inside legitimate Windows processes, invisible to most security tools. One of their most creative methods was sending fake resumes to targets. When opened, these would trigger a chain of events resulting in Brute Ratel being loaded into a legitimate Windows process called runtimebroker.exe. Your antivirus would see a normal Windows process, not a Russian hacker. You've probably clicked a suspicious email at some point. We all have. But imagine it wasn't just a scammer on the other end. It was a foreign intelligence operative backed by the full resources of a nation-state. And they weren't just after your credit card. They wanted diplomatic secrets, military plans, and infrastructure access. Their tactics kept evolving, getting more sophisticated with each campaign, and they were just warming up for what would come next. August 2022. APT-29 dropped Magic Web, a hack so powerful they could become anyone on a network. This was the moment when everything changed. Microsoft's security team discovered that APT-29 had created a tool unlike anything we'd seen before. They called it Magic Web. Think of this as the ultimate key, except instead of just opening doors, it let Russian intelligence officers become whoever they wanted on a network. Here's what happened. APT-29 targeted Active Directory Federation Services servers, ADFS for short. These servers have one critical job. They're the security guards that check everyone's ID before letting them access resources on a network. They verify you're who you say you are. Magic Web was genius in its simplicity. Once APT-29 had admin access to an ADFS server, they replaced a legitimate DLL file called Microsoft.identityserver.diagnostics.dll with their own backdoored version. A DLL is basically a library of code that Windows programs use. Their modified version contained extra code in something called the tracelog class. This infected code hooked into authentication functions with names like begin build and begin get client certificate. When I say hooked, I mean it intercepted the normal process and changed how it worked. What made this so devastating? When someone tried to authenticate to prove who they were, Magic Web would manipulate their certificates and issue fake claims. Authentication certificates are like digital ID cards. APT-29 could forge them perfectly. In plain terms, they could pretend to be anyone on the network. The CEO, the system administrator, military personnel, diplomats, anyone. Microsoft confirmed at least one breach using this technique. Magic Web evolved from an earlier tool called Foggy Web. APT-29 had been refining their approach for years. Each version is getting harder to detect. I want you to understand what makes this different. Before, they might steal someone's password or hijack a session. With Magic Web, they owned the entire authentication system. They didn't need to steal keys anymore. They controlled the system that contains them all. The target list was exactly what you'd expect from a nation-state operation. Government agencies and critical infrastructure across Europe, the United States, and Asia. This wasn't about stealing credit cards or looking for ransomware payouts. This was about silent, persistent access to the most sensitive systems in the Western world, to steal secrets. And remember, this tool required admin access to deploy. That means APT-29 had already deeply compromised these networks before installing Magic Web. It wasn't their entry point. It was their way of ensuring they never lost access once they were in. You'd think getting caught by Microsoft would slow these guys down, right? Man, that's not how state-sponsored hackers operate. Between October 2022 and March 2023, cybersecurity experts at CERT Polska tracked a whole new wave of attacks. These weren't cleanup efforts. This was APT-29 evolving in real time. They rolled out 3 brand new tools in just 6 months. Think about that. 3 complex, sophisticated malware packages in half a year. That's not some basement hacker operation. That's a fully funded cyber warfare program with serious resources. First came Dying Ember in October 2022. This was clever. They hijacked Notion, a legitimate collaboration platform that tons of businesses use for project management. APT-29 repurposed it for command and control, basically using it as a way to send instructions to infected computers. When their malicious traffic flows through Notion, it looks like normal business communication to most security tools. By February 2023, they deployed Halfrig. This malware had embedded Cobalt Strike code, the same remote access toolkit from their earlier campaigns, but repackaged and harder to detect. 2 months later, in March, they introduced QuarterRig, which shared code with Halfrig, but was specifically designed for espionage. Their delivery method stayed consistent. They sent spear phishing emails disguised as communications from embassies. These weren't random spam either. They were carefully crafted. When targets clicked on these emails, APT-29 used HTML smuggling like they previously did to deliver malicious files. This technique hides dangerous code inside what looks like normal web content. Your browser processes it, and boom. Suddenly, there's a malicious ISO or zip file on your system without any download warnings. These files contained something called Envy Scout, a dropper tool. A dropper's only job is to get inside your system and then download the actual malware. It's like the advanced team that sneaks in to open the door for the rest of the crew. Once in, they used DLL sideloading, basically tricking legitimate Windows programs into loading their malicious code instead of the real support files they need. They also used LNK files, those Windows shortcuts you click every day, to quietly trigger malicious code execution. Then something interesting happened in April 2023. Russia's Federal Security Service, the FSB, publicly accused NATO and the United States of launching over 5,000 cyber attacks against Russian infrastructure since 2022. They claimed Ukraine's network infrastructure was being used to deploy Western cyber weapons. On the exact same day, Poland's intelligence services pointed the finger right back at Russia, attributing ongoing NATO and EU attacks to APT-29. The next day, Russian telecom giant Rostelecom released a report documenting 40 successful attacks on Russian energy and media sectors over the past year. But here's where it gets weird. They attributed most attacks to Chinese groups like APT-27 and APT-41, with North Korea's Lazarus Group mixed in. So who's telling the truth? Welcome to the murky world of cybersecurity, where proof is rare and political agendas often drive the narrative. What we know for certain is this. As of April 2023, APT-29 was still actively targeting foreign ministries and diplomats with increasingly sophisticated tools. Their attacks were ongoing. Their evolution was accelerating. And despite being exposed multiple times, they showed no signs of backing down. APT-29's arsenal keeps growing. Their latest tools show they're not just hackers, they're architects of chaos. By March 2023, we've tracked this Russian hacking group deploying an entirely new set of cyber weapons. But here's where things get really interesting. A shocking 72% of all successful attacks, even the sophisticated ones, got in through known vulnerabilities. Think about that. These weren't 0 days or exotic exploits. These were security holes that companies already knew about but hadn't fixed. You have the lock. You know how to use it, you just didn't. This isn't just a Russian problem. The same weakness exists in networks worldwide. Even when APT-29 brought their A-game with tools like Magic Web, Snowy Amber, and others, they still primarily relied on organizations not patching their systems. The average attack timeline was just 7 days from initial breach to mission completion. That's how long these hackers needed to get in, find what they wanted, and get out. They also documented a 5 times increase in hacktivism, politically motivated attacks. Since the start of what Russia calls their special military operation in Ukraine, the cyber landscape had become a digital battlefield with 3 main players: nation-state APT groups, 20%, hacktivists, 38%, and ransomware gangs, 38%. Beyond vulnerability exploitation, 2 other methods dominated supply chain attacks targeting contractors, just like SolarWinds, and phishing paired with credential theft. These aren't new techniques. They're just executed with military precision. I've shown you APT-29's evolution from SolarWinds in 2020 to their latest tools in 2023. I've walked you through their techniques and targets. But here's the part that should help keep you safe at night. While you can't stop a nation-state hacking group by yourself, you can make their job a lot harder by doing the online equivalent of locking your doors. Update your systems. Use multi-factor authentication. Be suspicious of unexpected emails, even from people you think you know. The most sophisticated hackers in the world, backed by the full resources of a nuclear superpower, still rely on the most basic security mistake: leaving known vulnerabilities unpatched. Don't be the easy target. Protect yourself with Proton VPN, link in the description below.
Ranked cyber attacks as NATO's #1 future threat.
We are on heightened alert with respect to cybersecurity and our own defenses.
In the shadows of Washington, D.C., a war was being waged, one that would redefine cyber espionage. I want to tell you about something wild that went down in early 2022. Just before Russia invaded Ukraine, a notorious hacking group was making moves in America's capital city. These weren't your average hackers. We're talking about APT-28, also called Forest Blizzard, a Russian state-sponsored group tied directly to the GRU, Russia's military intelligence agency. These guys have been around since at least 2004, and they've got quite a resume. Remember the 2016 US election interference? That was them. They hacked the Democratic National Committee and the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. They've even breached the German federal parliament. They're the real deal. Elite cyber operatives working for the Russian government. So, here's what happened. In Washington, D.C., there's this organization. Security researchers call it Organization A, that was doing work related to Ukraine. And just as Russia was preparing to launch its invasion, APT-28 targeted them. The timing wasn't a coincidence. On February 4th, 2022, APT-28 had used what's now called a nearest neighbor attack. Instead of trying to break into Organization A directly, they first compromised the network of another organization, Organization B, located right across the street. Think of it like breaking into your neighbor's house, then using their window to jump into yours, bypassing all your fancy door locks and security cameras. What makes this attack so brilliant and so dangerous is that it let the hackers remotely connect to their target's Wi-Fi network without ever having to physically get close to the building. They could sit safely in Russia while jumping from network to network until they reached their goal. Welcome to the Hacker Gallery. This is the story of APT-28's nearest neighbor attack. It all started with a series of login attempts that seemed harmless at first, but they were the first salvos in a sophisticated cyber assault. Listen to this. In late January 2022, while most of Washington, D.C. was focused on the growing tensions between Russia and Ukraine. APT-28 was quietly making their move. These guys weren't rushing in. Their first tactic? Password spraying. Now, this isn't your typical brute force attack where you hammer one account with thousands of password attempts. That's amateur hour. What these guys did was way more sophisticated. See, password spraying is when you take common passwords, stuff like Winter 2022 or Company 123, and try them across many different accounts. Just one attempt per account, then move to the next. This keeps you under the radar, because you never trigger account lockouts. It's low and slow, exactly how pros operate. The hackers targeted Organization A's public web service. They kept probing until, bingo, they validated some credentials that worked. But here's the crazy part. While Organization A had strong multi-factor authentication on their external services, their internal Wi-Fi network only required a username and password. That's it. No second factor, no token, no text message confirmation. That gap in security? That's all APT-28 needed. They leveraged those stolen credentials to connect to the enterprise Wi-Fi. I'm telling you, these hackers are like water. They find the smallest crack and pour right through it. Researchers found that APT-28 had compromised 3 separate accounts. At one point, one of the passwords expired and got updated, briefly disrupting the hacker's access. But these guys were persistent. By early February, they were back in using another account. Authentication events with the same MAC address and a different username went back to late January 2022. That's when this whole campaign started. Now, fast forward to February 4th. Strange activity was detected coming from C program data, a directory that's commonly used by attackers to stage their operations. The security team found a batch file called servetask.bat running bad commands. Let me break down what this batch file was doing. First, it ran these commands. What's happening here? The attackers were dumping the Windows registry HIVEs, SAM, security, and system. These are essentially databases that store all the critical system settings and user login information in Windows. Then, they ran a PowerShell command to compress these files into a single zip archive called out.zip. Classic exfiltration preparation. Package everything up nice and neat so you can quietly slip it out the back door. The investigation revealed they likely used a tool called Goose Egg to exploit a vulnerability in the Windows print spooler, CVE 2022-3. 8028. This gave them higher privileges in the system. They deployed other tools too. Batch scripts like execute.bat and doit.bat, plus custom DLLs with names like wazegoose23.dll and wazegoose52.dll. Digging even further into the wireless controller logs, I noticed connections to 3 access points located near a conference room window. That's suspicious, right? Why would legitimate traffic cluster around a window? When they captured and analyzed network packets, they found NetBIOS name service queries. That's a protocol computers use to discover each other on a network. Think of it like a network phone book that translates names to addresses. These queries revealed something shocking. The system the attackers were using belonged to Organization B, a completely different company located right across the street. The attacker was connecting from an organization located right across the street. APT-28 had compromised Organization B first, then used their network as a stepping stone to reach their actual target. This is what makes the nearest neighbor attack so brilliant and so dangerous. These Russian hackers never had to physically approach their target. They daisy-chained through nearby networks, jumping from one to another until they reached their goal, all while sitting safely thousands of miles away in Russia. But don't go anywhere. Because by the time researchers caught on to APT-28's attack, they were already long gone and preparing their next move. Instead of trying to get back in through the corporate network, the Russian hackers went after the guest Wi-Fi instead. Now, normally, this shouldn't be a problem. Guest networks are supposed to be completely separate from corporate networks. That's Network Security 101. Your visitors get internet access, but they can't touch your internal systems. But APT28 discovered something crucial. There was one computer in the organization that was connected to both networks at the same time. Security professionals call this a dual-homed system. It's like having one foot in each world. The guest Wi-Fi and the corporate network. And that, my friends, was all they needed. The attackers executed two critical commands using the Windows NetShell tool. Let me walk you through what they did because it's genius-level hacking. First command is shown here on the screen. What this did was create a new firewall rule with an innocent-sounding name. It opened port 12345 for incoming connections. Think of it like a new door into the office. Then came the second command. This is where it gets really clever. This command set up what's called port forwarding. Anything coming in on port 12345 from the guest Wi-Fi would get automatically redirected to port 445 on the corporate network. Why port 445? That's the port used by SMB, server message block, the protocol Windows uses for file sharing and other network services. There was one system that was accessible from both networks. Just one computer sitting between both worlds. Think about what this means. The organization had two separate networks specifically to prevent this kind of breach. But that single dual-home system created a bridge between them. This technique allowed APT28 to move laterally from the guest network into the corporate environment. From Russia, they could now remotely control systems on the internal network using RDP, Remote Desktop Protocol, and custom PowerShell scripts. Look, when you get hacked once, that's bad. When you get hacked twice by the same group, I don't know what to say. First thing they did was isolate that guest Wi-Fi network. No more bridges. No more shortcuts. The team also took a hard look at their Wi-Fi security practices. Remember how this whole thing started? Weak authentication on the enterprise Wi-Fi. So they implemented multi-factor authentication, MFA, for all access points. That means you need more than just a password to connect. You might need a password plus a text message code or an app-generated token. Way harder to crack. And check this out. APT28 had been using some serious tradecraft to cover their tracks. They used a Windows command called cipher.exe with the /wc parameter. What this does is overwrite deleted files with random data so they can't be recovered. It's like shredding documents instead of just throwing them in the trash. They also tried to steal something called ntds.dit. That's basically the heart of an Active Directory environment, containing all user credentials. They attempted to grab it using volume shadow copies with a tool called VSS-admin. Volume shadows are snapshots of your disk that Windows creates, and attackers love them because they can copy locked files. What's wild about these techniques is that they're using legitimate Windows tools. PowerShell, cipher.exe, VSS-admin, things that are already on the system. Security pros call this living off the land. Man, this whole thing is just wild when you really think about it. This attack didn't happen in a vacuum. While Russian tanks were literally rolling toward Ukraine's borders, Russian hackers were breaking into networks of organizations working on Ukrainian projects. This wasn't random. This was coordinated digital espionage supporting a physical invasion. That's the world we live in now. Cyber warfare isn't some sci-fi concept anymore. It's happening every day. And APT-28? These guys aren't going away. Think about their track record. The 2016 DNC hack that influenced a presidential election, breaking into the German federal parliament, numerous intrusions into European governmental institutions, and now, this innovative nearest neighbor attack. What makes them so dangerous is how they keep evolving their tactics. Take their tool called Goose Egg. It exploits a vulnerability in the Windows print spooler, CVE 2022-38028. That was being used since June 2020, but wasn't patched until October 2022. That's over 2 years of exploiting a weakness that most organizations didn't even know existed. I think there are 3 massive lessons from this whole saga that every organization needs to take seriously. First, Wi-Fi vulnerabilities. How many companies right now have strong protection on their external services, but weak authentication on their internal Wi-Fi? I bet it's a lot. This attack proved you need multi-factor authentication everywhere, not just on your public-facing stuff. Second, network isolation. That guest Wi-Fi breach was a wake-up call. Having separate networks means nothing if there's even one system connecting them. Third, and this is the big one, dealing with state-sponsored hackers requires a completely different mindset. These are trained military intelligence operatives with patience, resources, and clear objectives. They don't give up after the first failure. APT-28 is still out there, and they're not alone.
Microsoft updated their 8K this morning, disclosing that they've been unable to stop this ongoing cyber attack by
Russians who exploited a flaw that they discovered in a Microsoft operating system.
Welcome to the Hacker Gallery. I'm your host, the Operator. And today we're diving into a hidden flaw in Microsoft Outlook. This flaw opened the door for Russian hackers to infiltrate government and military systems across Europe. The attack came from APT-28, also known as Fancy Bear or Strontium. These aren't just random hackers. We're talking about a Russian government-affiliated group directly tied to GRU Unit 26165, Russia's military intelligence. APT-28 exploited what we call a zero-click vulnerability in Microsoft Outlook, CVE 2023-23397. Zero-click means exactly what it sounds like. The victim didn't need to click anything, download anything, or even interact with the message at all to get compromised. Here's how it worked. The attackers sent specially crafted Outlook notes to their targets. Hidden inside these notes was a property that the hackers configured to be malicious. It's this property shown on screen here. The property is normally used for setting a custom notification sound for items such as meeting notifications. But in this case, Fancy Bear exploited it to make it point to a network location controlled by the hackers. When these messages hit the victim's inbox, something invisible happened. Their computer automatically tried to connect to the attacker's system through something called SMB, basically a protocol computers use to share files over a network. This automatic connection forced the victim's computer to send over important information to the hacker's network. And as you'll soon see, this would become the starting point of their operation. What makes this attack scary is that, from the victim's perspective, nothing happened. No suspicious pop-ups, no effect on the system, no demands. Just silence as sensitive credentials were quietly harvested. In cybersecurity, this kind of invisible attack represents the highest threat level. For months, APT-28 operated in the shadows, escalating their attacks. That automatic connection I was telling you about. Basically, it forced the victim's computer to send over its NTLM hash. Think of it as an encrypted version of the user's password. With these stolen hashes, the attackers could access systems and move around inside networks without setting off alarms. Once these Russian hackers had those stolen password hashes, they went to work. From April through December 2022, APT-28 used those stolen credentials to go everywhere. They weaponized ordinary tools like Impacket. That's an open-source collection of Python classes for working with network protocols. They also deployed PowerShell Empire, a framework that gives attackers a way to run commands and control systems once they're inside. These hackers performed net NTLM v2 relay attacks against Exchange servers. Basically, they took those stolen authentication hashes and passed them along to fool other systems into thinking, hey, this is a legitimate user. They used the Exchange Web Services API, that's the programming interface for Microsoft Exchange, to scan through email folders and then gave themselves owner privileges on mailboxes. With those permissions, they could read emails, copy sensitive data, and even set up rules to forward messages to themselves. Worst part is, even when organizations detected something wrong and reset passwords, APT-28 maintained access. APT-28, or Fancy Bear, will build multiple ways to stay inside your network. So cutting off one path doesn't mean anything. For 8 months, APT-28, it had been silently accumulating power, one network at a time. Finally, on March 14th, 2023, Microsoft released a fix for this vulnerability. Nearly a year after APT-28 had first exploited it. The severity rating for this vulnerability, 9.8 out of 10. That's about as bad as it gets. The patch was straightforward. It added something called a map URL to zone check. Basically, it stops Outlook from letting the note connect to internet addresses. Microsoft also gave out a PowerShell script to help organizations find and remove any malicious messages already sitting in their systems. Sadly, though, later in the year in May, Microsoft had to release another patch. This new vulnerability, CVE 2023-293-24, let attackers bypass the first patch by making those public internet URLs look like they were internal ones. Later in the year, in October 2023, France's cybersecurity agency reported that APT-28 was targeting French government entities, businesses, universities, research institutes, and think tanks. Same zero-click attacks, same vulnerability, new victims. By December 2023, Microsoft and Poland's Cyber Command issued a joint warning about APT-28, that they leveled up. They weren't just exploiting the Outlook vulnerability anymore. If you've been on the internet in the last 20 years, you'll know what WinRAR is. It's that tool for zipping and unzipping files. It's everywhere. Well, the Russian hackers were now leveraging CVE 2023-38831, a serious vulnerability in WinRAR and spear phishing attacks. Spear phishing is highly targeted emails crafted for specific individuals or organizations. They might look like they're from your colleague or boss. They might reference real projects you're working on. And they're nearly impossible to spot if you're not trained to look for them. The target list was expanding too. Now they were going after Ukrainian entities heavily, plus critical infrastructure across the US, Europe, and the Middle East. The timing tells us something important too. APT-28 started using that WinRAR vulnerability in September 2023, just as organizations were getting better at defending against the Outlook attack. These guys always have a dirty exploit ready. The US government launched a counterstrike to cripple APT-28's operations. On January 20th, 2024, the United States stopped playing defense and took direct action against these Russian operatives. The Justice Department authorized what they called a disruption operation. Basically, a legal green light to hack the hackers. What they went after specifically was APT-28's botnet. That's a network of compromised computers and servers that these hackers controlled remotely. Think of it like cutting off the puppet master's strings. The US government was essentially conducting a digital raid against GRU Unit 26165, the elite branch of Russian military intelligence. Microsoft continued monitoring the situation through their Defender XDR platform, which is their advanced threat detection system. They were collecting real-time data on how APT-28 responded to having their infrastructure disrupted. This intelligence was crucial. It showed which of APT-28's command servers went dark and which ones they tried to bring back online. The technical details of exactly how they dismantled APT-28's infrastructure weren't publicly disclosed. That's classified information. Here's the thing that I couldn't stop thinking about. Back to 2016, the Democratic National Committee got hacked. APT-28 breaks into their networks and steals thousands of emails and documents. They dump them online for the world to see. Political chaos ensues. It was the first time many Americans realized that hacking wasn't just about credit card theft or defaced websites. It was politics too. That wasn't APT-28's first rodeo, though. These guys have been operating since at least 2007. That's over 15 years of constant cyber espionage campaigns. Think about that. While the iPhone was just being invented, these Russian hackers were already establishing their operations. The 2016 DNC hack exposed the true face of APT-28. The FBI, CIA, and NSA all pointed to the same culprit, GRU Unit 26165, Russia's military intelligence, not random hackers, not cyber criminals, military officers carrying out strategic operations. When you look at what they did in 2022 and 2023 with the Outlook vulnerability, it's the exact same playbook. The targets are different. European government agencies, energy infrastructure, transportation systems, Ukrainian military. But the goal is identical. Gather intelligence, establish persistence, and advance Russian strategic interests. The January 2024 disruption by the US government? It was a significant blow. It damaged their infrastructure and interrupted their operations. But if history teaches us anything, it's that APT-28 adapts. They evolve. They've been doing this too long to be stopped by a single operation. APT-28 will be back with new vulnerabilities, new techniques, new targets. The defenders will patch and block and monitor, and the cycle will continue.
Microsoft hacked recently.
Microsoft is said to have been hacked as part of a suspected Russian campaign.
And Microsoft saying it was hacked by a Russian state-backed cyber group.
Midnight Blizzard, also tracked as Nobelium, APT-29, or Cozy Bear, isn't your average hacking group. They're linked directly to Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, the SVR. These aren't opportunistic criminals looking for a quick payday. These are professional intelligence operators with strategic objectives. In June 2021, they made their first move against one of the world's most popular tech giants, Microsoft. They got inside Microsoft's network and installed what we call an information stealing Trojan. a malicious program that secretly extracts sensitive data. This gave them access to basic account information for a small subset of Microsoft customers. But this was just the beginning. The stolen data became ammunition for their next phase targeted phishing attacks. They crafted deceptive emails designed to trick recipients into revealing even more information or granting access to their systems. Microsoft discovered the breach and later acknowledged it with a sad admission. Midnight Blizzard's initial attack was pretty hectic. Let me tell you exactly what you need to know. Their method of entry combined two related but distinct techniques. First, password spray. Imagine trying a single common password like this one against hundreds of accounts simultaneously. This bypasses account lockout defenses that would normally trigger after multiple failed attempts on a single account. When that didn't work, they escalated to traditional brute force attacks, hammering specific accounts with password after password until something finally cracked. Once inside the support agent system, Midnight Blizzard deployed their information-stealing Trojan, that thing I was telling you about. Then, through this compromised position, the hackers gained access to account information for some Microsoft customers. But like I said, this wasn't the end of it. The real prize came next. Using the stolen data, they crafted targeted phishing campaigns, specially designed emails that appeared legitimate but contained malicious links or attachments. Their targets weren't random. They focused primarily on IT companies, 57% of their victims. The organizations that build and maintain critical infrastructure. Another 20% were government entities. I need to emphasize this. By targeting IT providers, Midnight Blizzard could potentially gain access to their clients. A classic supply chain attack. And government targets? That's straight-up espionage. Microsoft later confirmed in their official blog that the activity was largely focused on US interests, about 45%, followed by 10% in the UK, and smaller numbers from Germany and Canada. In total, the campaign touched organizations across 36 countries. But Midnight Blizzard would lay dormant for over 2 years before making their next move. A much more sophisticated attack leveraging what they'd learned during this first one. In cybersecurity, we often focus on the craziest attacks, but just know the most dangerous attacks often begin with the least traces. Two years later, in late 2023, they launched an even more sophisticated attack. On November 30th, they were back with vengeance. And who did they target? You wouldn't believe it, but it was Microsoft. Again, they had their eyes set on a legacy non-production test tenant account. Let me explain that for you. This was an outdated account used for testing software, not for running actual services. The kind of account that's easy to overlook in security audits. The critical weakness? This account lacked multi-factor authentication, or MFA. That's when you need both a password and a second verification method, like a code sent to your phone. Without MFA, the account was vulnerable to the same password spray technique they'd used before. So the hackers went at it again. And once they got inside, they discovered an OAuth application with elevated privileges. OAuth is a protocol that lets apps access data without sharing your password. It's what happens when you click sign in with Google on a website. But in this case, the OAuth app had powerful permissions within Microsoft's systems. Midnight Blizzard didn't just use the compromised OAuth app. They created their own malicious OAuth applications. Then they assigned these apps something called the Full Access as App role for Exchange Online. That permission is like having full access to Microsoft's email system. It gave them complete access to read corporate emails, specifically targeting senior leadership, the cybersecurity team, and the legal department. Think about that for a second. The cybersecurity team's emails would contain details about Microsoft's defenses and potential knowledge about Midnight Blizzard itself. The legal team's emails might reveal planned responses to breaches, and senior leadership emails could contain strategic information and high-level communications. Now, you might think that was the end of this story, but what made this attack particularly dangerous wasn't just what they stole. It was how the breach enabled what security professionals call lateral movement. That test account, despite being for non-production use, had connections that allowed the hackers to hop from one part of Microsoft's network to another. Remember, advanced persistent threat actors are patient. This is exactly why. They're playing chess while others play checkers. They're thinking several moves ahead, gathering intelligence not just for immediate use, but for future operations. Spoiler alert, the information they gathered in these emails would become Microsoft's worst enemy. On January 12th, 2024, Microsoft's security team spotted something unusual in their Exchange Web Services logs. These logs are essentially where all the records of all email server activity are kept. Think of them as surveillance cameras for your email system. They capture everything happening behind the scenes. The team noticed patterns matching known Midnight Blizzard tactics. Specific behaviors like unusual password spray attempts and suspicious OAuth applications triggered their alarms. Yes, you heard me right. Us cybersecurity defenders can actually track patterns used by hackers, and even use the patterns to identify them or link them to previous known attacks. Anyway, Microsoft immediately activated their incident response process. This is what separates professional security teams from amateurs. They didn't panic. They executed a pre-planned protocol. First, they launched an investigation to determine the scope of the breach. Then, they began notifying employees whose emails had been compromised. Primarily, leadership and security personnel. Just 1 week later, on January 19th, Microsoft went public with the information. This is a crucial moment in any major breach. The decision to disclose. Microsoft took the unusual step of directly naming Midnight Blizzard as the culprit. Companies often avoid attributing attacks to specific groups, especially nation-state actors. But Microsoft was confident in their identification. They also let everyone know that it was not the result of a vulnerability in Microsoft products or services. This wasn't a software flaw or zero-day exploit. The attackers had found a human and process weakness, that test account without proper security controls. Well, thanks Microsoft, but the damage is still done. By January 26th, the investigation revealed something even worse, that Microsoft wasn't the only target. Using the attack patterns they'd identified, Microsoft's threat intelligence team discovered that Hewlett-Packard Enterprise had been hit by the same group using similar techniques. Microsoft was now tracking the predator that had been stalking them. But there was one sentence in Microsoft's statement that would soon prove painfully ironic. They assured the public, to date, there is no evidence that the threat actor had any access to customer environments, production systems, or the source code or AI systems. That statement contained a critical qualifier. To date. Because as we'll see, Midnight Blizzard wasn't finished. The emails they'd stolen contained valuable secrets that would soon unlock doors to Microsoft's most sensitive systems. On March 8, 2024, Microsoft made a chilling announcement. Those emails Midnight Blizzard stole back in November. They contained authentication tokens, digital keys that prove you are who you say you are without entering a password. There were API keys, special codes that allowed different software systems to talk to each other. And there were credentials, usernames, and passwords. These weren't just any credentials. These were high-value secrets that opened doors to Microsoft's most precious assets, their source code repositories. Source code repositories are where companies store the actual blueprints to their software, the raw code, the proprietary algorithms, the inner workings of their products. This is intellectual property worth billions. Microsoft's Security Response Center confirmed it themselves. In recent weeks, we have seen evidence that Midnight Blizzard is using information initially exfiltrated from our corporate email systems to gain, or attempt to gain, unauthorized access. This has included access to some of the company's source code repositories and internal systems. Microsoft detected a massive surge in attack attempts. Password spray attacks, remember those from the earlier breaches, increased by a factor of 10. From dozens of attempts daily to hundreds. For the first time, Midnight Blizzard had penetrated beyond Microsoft's corporate communications and into the heart of their intellectual property. This is the ultimate goal of sophisticated state-sponsored threat actors. They don't just want your data. They don't just want your communications. They want to understand how you build your technology, how you defend it, and what you know about them. Midnight Blizzard had just gained a treasure trove of knowledge about one of the world's most important technology companies. In the wake of these attacks, Microsoft took decisive action to protect its systems and its customers. After discovering the source code compromise in March 2024, Microsoft moved quickly. Microsoft repeatedly assured the public that no customer-facing systems were breached. Your personal data in Office 365, your company's information in Azure, your gaming profile on Xbox, all remained secure. But behind the scenes, Microsoft was racing to close security gaps. They implemented stricter multi-factor authentication enforcement across their systems. Remember that legacy test account without MFA that started this whole mess? Well, Microsoft did an audit of their network, hunting for other forgotten doors that might be left unlocked. For months, the full scope of the breach remained unclear. Then, in July 2024, troubling new details emerged. The breach had touched federal agencies, including the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. The VA holds sensitive information on millions of American veterans. Healthcare data, personal information, service records. The exact impact wasn't publicly disclosed, but the implications were serious. This was now a matter of national security. Those stolen emails from Microsoft systems likely contained information that helped Midnight Blizzard target these government agencies. This is the domino effect of modern cyber espionage. Even after detection and remediation, the repercussions continue to unfold months later. What's most concerning is what we don't yet know. The information stolen from Microsoft's source code repositories could be used to create new malware and evade detection. Here's one thing I didn't mention about the attack on Microsoft. The investigation revealed something pretty interesting about Midnight Blizzard's motives. These hackers were found to be reading emails and attachments, specifically looking for intelligence about themselves. They were searching exactly for emails that contained Midnight Blizzard. They wanted to know what Microsoft knew about them. The February 2024 surge in password spray attacks I told you about, increasing from tens to hundreds daily, wasn't random either. It was an intentional escalation of their attacks because they knew they'd been detected. It's like they were saying, "We know you know, and we don't care." This video isn't meant to frighten you. It's meant to prepare you, because the same techniques used against Microsoft Password sprays, OAuth abuse, lateral movement through test environments. These are being used against organizations of all sizes every day. Will you have what it takes to defend yourself? Let me know in the comments below.
Russia taking down one of the top ransomware gangs in the world. The FSB, which is Russia's intelligence service, says it arrested members of...
A new Russian ransomware gang has just emerged from the deep web. I remember when the alert hit my threat feeds. March 7th, 2025. That's when Van Helsing first appeared on underground forums. Not just another ransomware, but a complete service package. Ransomware-as-a-service. Think of it like a criminal franchise where developers build cyber weapons, then rent them out to anyone willing to pull the trigger. Van Helsing's business model was particularly special. If you already had a reputation in hacking circles, you could join for free. New players? That'll be $5,000 up front. But the split was generous. 80% to the affiliate who deployed the ransomware. 20% to the developers. All automated through blockchain transactions that release payment extremely fast. What immediately caught my attention was the rule in their terms of conditions. The group was completely against attacking Commonwealth of Independent States countries. Russian cybercriminals often avoid attacking their homeland or allies to stay off local authorities' radar. But that gives us our first clue that points these hackers straight to Russian origins. Van Helsing wasn't amateur either. Their ransomware targeted virtually everything. Cast a wide enough net, and you'll always catch something. This is how modern cybercrime evolves. Not through lone hackers, but through professional criminal enterprises with business models and 24/7 live customer support. As I watched Van Helsing take shape that March, one thing became clear. It was about to spread faster than anyone expected. March 11th, 2025. Just 4 days after Van Helsing's dark web debut, the first variant of the ransomware appeared. A Windows version written in C++. A programming language hackers favor when they need their code to run fast and efficiently. Look, when I examine malware, I'm searching for any fingerprints left behind. And there was one. A PDB path still embedded in the code. That's a software debug file that shows exactly where the program was built. Look at it right here. 5 days later, March 16th. A second Windows variant appeared. Think about that. 5 days between versions. What's truly disturbing? This second variant claimed its first victim that same day. A researcher from Checkpoint put it perfectly. The ransomware is really fresh. In almost 10 days, we found 2 Windows samples and 3 victims. 3 victims already. The second file they discovered was a loader. A loader is a type of malware that delivers the next stage of the attack, typically the final ransomware file. But this one had an invalid buffer error, a memory handling mistake that shows the developers were still working out bugs in their code. The picture became clearer. This wasn't polished malware. The ransomware was so new it was still just a rough copy. When something this raw moves this fast, it means the developers aren't perfectionists. They're opportunists. They'd rather deploy now and fix later. Digging into the code revealed command line options that let attackers customize how the ransomware operates. Command line options like H for help, V for verbose logs that show detailed information about what the program is doing, and no logs for silent operation that leaves minimal evidence. But what caught my attention were the unimplemented features, especially one labeled Spread vCenter. You see, Van Helsing ransomware targets absolutely everything. Windows computers, Linux servers, BSD systems, ARM devices, even ESXi virtualization platforms that big companies use to run multiple systems on single servers. Those command line options I just showed you here. Spread vCenter. That's the code designed to target VMware ESXi through vCenter. Virtualization systems that big companies use to run dozens or hundreds of servers on a single machine. They hadn't built this feature yet, but the blueprint was right there for you to see. This wasn't just about encrypting a few computers. They were planning to hit enterprise infrastructure, the backbone of corporate America. When malware researchers find bugs in ransomware code, it's usually a relief. But in this case, it was a warning. The Van Helsing developers didn't care that their product wasn't perfect. They were racing to market, improving as they went, and already finding victims willing to pay. And somewhere in Texas, a city government was about to learn this lesson the hard way. A Texas city wakes up to find its entire government network locked down. Every computer screen across city departments displays the same thing: a new desktop wallpaper with the Van Helsing logo. An icon named VHLocker.ICO sits on desktops, taunting users. Look closer at the files and you'll see something chilling. Every document, spreadsheet, and database now ends with .VANHELSING. I've investigated dozens of ransomware attacks. This one plays out differently. The attackers leave a README file with instructions pointing to a Tor link. The demand? $500,000 in Bitcoin, transferable to this Bitcoin wallet. $500,000 to unlock a city's network. But here's where Van Helsing shows its true colors. This isn't simple ransomware. It's what we call double extortion. First, they lock your files so you can't access them. Classic ransomware move. But then comes the twist. They've also stolen copies of your data before encrypting it. Think about what a city government holds. Personal information on residents, tax records, financial reports, internal communications, law enforcement data. All of it now could be sitting on Van Helsing's servers. The threat is loud and clear. Pay up, or Van Helsing don't just keep your files locked. They publish everything on their extortion portal for the world to see. When I analyze their operations, what stands out is their persistence. They've modified system files to ensure their ransomware survives, even if you reboot. Every attempt to restore from backups is met with the discovery that those backups have been compromised as well. The Van Helsing operators have been inside the network for days, maybe weeks, before launching the encryption. The Texas city officials face an impossible choice. Pay criminals $500,000 from taxpayer money, or risk exposing every citizen's personal information to the world. And as the city council meets in emergency session, Van Helsing were just getting started. Texas was just the beginning. You might think hitting a U.S. city government would be enough to satisfy these operators. It wasn't. By the time cybersecurity teams were still unpacking the Texas attack, Van Helsing had already crossed the Atlantic. 2 more victims appeared on Van Helsing's extortion portal: a manufacturing company in France and a pharmaceutical firm in the United States. Same playbook, same demands. $500,000 in Bitcoin from each victim. Same threat pay-up, or we publish everything we stole. A government entity, a manufacturing operation, and a pharmaceutical company. 3 different sectors, 2 different countries, all hit within the same 16-day window. It's business to them. Cold, calculated business. The pharmaceutical company attack was concerning because it holds intellectual property worth billions. Research data, drug formulations, clinical trial results. The manufacturing firm? The kind of information competitors would pay fortunes for. Van Helsing were building a portfolio, proving they could penetrate any type of organization anywhere in the world. And that extortion portal, it's a psychological weapon. By publicly listing all 3 victims, they create a pressure cooker. Everyone can see who's been hit, competitors, customers, partners, all watching to see if you'll pay. It's public shaming. I'm telling you, this is the birth of a major ransomware operation in real time. The attacks I'm showing you right now all happened in just 2 weeks. Van Helsing operators were already counting their potential earnings. $1.5 million if all 3 victims paid up. By March 23rd, it was clear to those of us tracking this group. They were declaring war. I've been pulling apart Van Helsing's code for days now and reading over researcher findings. So I'll share with you some technical stuff about the ransomware. Van Helsing uses CHA-20, a high-speed encryption method that effectively scrambles data. Each file gets a unique 32-byte key. Think of it as an extremely complex password and a 12-byte nonce, a unique number used just once, to ensure the encryption pattern is never repeated. For files under 1 gigabyte, Van Helsing encrypts everything. For larger files, it only locks down about 30%, encrypting 1 megabyte chunks strategically throughout the file. Smart. It saves time while still making the data completely unusable. When you look at the control panel they built for affiliates, you see their elite skills. Their ransomware control panel has responsive design that works on both desktop and mobile. Light mode, dark mode, convenience for criminals working at any hour. A chat room, blog updates, 24/7 live support, and a place to upload victims' files. Back in Texas, city officials are at their breaking point. The city's attorney reminds them that paying ransoms isn't illegal, but it's discouraged by the FBI. The financial director points out they'd need to purchase Bitcoin worth $500,000. Not a simple process for the state government. Van Helsing's operators sit back, watching the drama unfold through their slick control panel. Another day at the office. For everyone else involved, it's the most intense, scary, and stressful game ever played. It's played with real lives, real money, and real consequences. In the days following the Van Helsing attacks, I watched Check Point and Cypherma release detailed reports breaking down Van Helsing's playbook, using what we call the MITRE attack framework. That framework helps defenders speak the same language when tracking hackers. Execution. It uses Windows Management Instrumentation. That's a legitimate Windows tool that lets you run commands across multiple systems. Hackers love using legitimate tools because they blend in with normal activity. Persistence. It adds registry, run, keys. This means it changes settings in your Windows registry so it automatically starts up again whenever you reboot your computer. Kill it once, and it comes right back. Defense evasion. It actively removes logs and evidence. Van Helsing is smart enough to clean up after itself, deleting the logs most security teams would use to track it. Impact. Finally, it encrypts all your data. The end game. The reason you're paying that ransom. What's truly valuable are the indicators of compromise, the IOCs. These are like wanted posters for malware. Security teams worldwide received Van Helsing's SHA-256 hash. This unique fingerprint lets them identify the ransomware instantly. They also got the ransom negotiation website URLs that were on the dark web and that Bitcoin wallet address. Organizations could now block these addresses from their networks, cutting off Van Helsing's communication channels. The reports revealed Van Helsing's evasion tactics. It actively hunts down and destroys your shadow copies. Those automatic backups Windows creates using a simple command. Unless you set the skip shadow flag when executing the ransomware, which most attackers won't. It also scans your network for SMB shares on port 445. That's how it spreads from one computer to every other machine on your network. Unless the no network flag is active, which again, attackers rarely use. With this intelligence, I give you the following recommendations to keep yourself or your network safe. Implement strong security protocols and maintain regular offline backups. Develop breach response plans and require multi-factor authentication. That extra step beyond passwords. Update all software immediately. Block those known Van Helsing URLs and monitor for suspicious WMI commands. Before I leave you quivering, you gotta hear this. Antonis Tarefos, a malware reverse engineer at Checkpoint, shared a disturbing insight. This is difficult to say, but usually they are operating under Russian territory. Recently, there were some leaks from the LOCKBIT affiliate groups, and even the affiliates inside them are actually afraid that they're going to be hired by the Russian government to perform various attacks. Russian ransomware operators like Van Helsing, or even the most notorious gang LOCKBIT, are afraid of being forcibly recruited by their own government. Remember that rule from the beginning? No attacks on Commonwealth of Independent States countries. Stay away from Russian interests, and the government stays away from you. Usually. Unless you're really good, then maybe you can come work for Putin. I've tracked Van Helsing from its first appearance on March 7th through every attack, every variant. And I can tell you with 100% confidence that this is not the last video you will see on Van Helsing.
Microsoft says the same group of Russian hackers responsible for the SolarWinds attack has struck again.
The latest attempt by Russian hackers to infiltrate U.S.
The U.S. government is targeting what it calls one of the world's most sophisticated international cybercrime operations.
Signal, WhatsApp. These aren't just apps on your phone. These apps allow for the most sensitive conversations as they're packed with layers of encryption that should be impenetrable. Should be. What if I told you Russian hackers have turned these secure channels into their playground? They found a way to silently infect victims without writing a single line of code. No complex malware, no zero-day exploits. Just a feature called linked devices that was designed for convenience. You've probably used it yourself. Scan a QR code, enter a confirmation number, and suddenly you can access your messages on your laptop or tablet. Convenient, right? In the hands of Russian intelligence, it's become the perfect weapon. Russia is hunting the people who shape wars and politics, focusing intensely on those connected to the Ukraine conflict. Military commanders, intelligence officers. When these people believe they're having private conversations, Moscow is reading every word. It all started when Ukrainian citizens started getting WhatsApp messages about a petition to award someone the Hero of Ukraine title. It's brilliant psychological manipulation. In a nation at war, who wouldn't want to support their heroes? The messages direct people to what looks exactly like the official electronic petitions website. Perfect replica, right down to the presidential seal. But when victims click the link, they're taken to a fake website that asks for a phone number. Seems reasonable for a petition, right? Then it generates a code and asks you to enter it. What most people don't realize is that this code isn't verifying your petition signature. It's actually triggering WhatsApp's linked devices feature, connecting your entire account to a device controlled by Russian hackers. These aren't hackers trying to break WhatsApp's encryption. They're tricking you into voluntarily handing over the keys. The attackers even created tutorial videos showing people exactly how to enter the codes. They're literally teaching their victims how to compromise themselves. By April 20th, security researchers identified 18 different fake domain names running this scam. 18! That's not some random phishing attempt. That's a coordinated campaign. Once they have access, they can read every message you send. They can impersonate you to your contacts. They can download your data, your photos, your locations. Everything you thought was private is now in their hands. But this is just the warm-up. Fast forward to November 2024. The Russian hacking group Star Blizzard, also known as COLDRIVER or UNC 4057, decides to aim higher. They start spear phishing specific high-value individuals. They send emails pretending to be from a U.S. official, inviting the target to join a WhatsApp group for Ukraine support coordination. The email includes a QR code that's supposed to add you to this group. Now what happens next is so smart. The QR code in the first email is deliberately broken. It doesn't work. This forces the target to reply asking for help, creating that initial back-and-forth interaction that builds trust. The attackers respond with a second email containing a t.ly shortened link. These URL shorteners are perfect for attacks because they mask the actual destination. Click it, and you're taken to what looks like a legitimate WhatsApp invitation page with a new QR code. Scan that code, and you've just linked your WhatsApp account to a device sitting on some hacker's desk in Russia. Every message you send about military aid, diplomatic negotiations, or strategic decisions is now being read in real time by Russian intelligence. February 2025. The Russians are done playing games. 5 different Russian military hacking divisions launch a coordinated assault on Signal Messenger. This is the app that they turned to when WhatsApp's weaknesses were brought to light. And the Russians just blew the door wide open. Let me walk you through how this attack unfolded, because you're straight up witnessing cyber warfare. A group called UNC 5792 starts hosting what look like legitimate Signal Group invitations. They're perfect copies of the real thing, except for one critical difference. The code behind them contains a special URI. Think of it as a command that tells your phone what to do. When victims click this link, thinking they're joining a Signal group, that command automatically triggers Signal's device linking feature. No confirmation required. In an instant, their entire Signal account is connected to Russian intelligence. Meanwhile, another group, UNC 4221, takes a different approach. They create fake versions of Ukraine's military applications, specifically targeting the COLDRIVER app that Ukrainian forces use for battlefield awareness. Hidden in these fake apps are QR codes that, when scanned, trigger the same device linking process. But what I'm about to tell you next is terrifying. APT-44, better known as Sandworm, isn't just sitting behind computers. They're physically collecting phones and devices captured on the battlefield. Think about that. Russian soldiers taking smartphones off Ukrainian prisoners or from the dead. They install malware called Infamous Chisel on Android phones and WaveSign on Windows devices. These programs extract the entire Signal database, including all message history. WaveSign runs commands like this that decrypt and recover all stored messages from a Signal database. They're not breaking the encryption. They're using the keys they've captured to unlock everything. While this is happening, another sophisticated military Russian hacking squad called Turla deploys PowerShell scripts targeting Signal desktop users. Their code compresses and packages Signal configuration files for extraction. And finally, the fifth group, UNC 1151, uses a Windows utility called RoboCopy to silently copy entire Signal directories from compromised computers. This is an offensive attack from the Russian military targeting every possible way to access Signal communications, the equivalent of surrounding their opponent's army from all sides. When you're hunting hackers, you follow the trail of fake domains, malicious code, and network traffic. Each thread pulls back to command servers where the attacks are coordinated. They're mapping out the hackers' networks like signalgroups.tech and signalconfirm.site. Websites built to look exactly like Signal's login pages. Remember those 18 domains used in the WhatsApp attacks? By October 2024, many were seized in coordinated takedowns. Servers went dark. The Russian hackers' infrastructure crumbled, but the Russians immediately adapted. New phishing kits appeared within days. Updated versions of the infamous Chisel malware started hitting Android devices. Fresh domains popped up as fast as the old ones were taken down. The December attacks targeting Ukrainian defense personnel with mesh agent malware weren't isolated incidents. They were part of this larger campaign, giving Russian intelligence remote access to military systems while their other tools were stealing Signal messages. Many compromised accounts are still active. The victims don't know they've been hit. Russian intelligence can sit quietly, reading messages for weeks or months before anyone notices. The battle has shifted from breaking in to staying in, and the Russians are very, very good at maintaining access once they have it. These phishing campaigns targeting Russia's enemies have been active for a long time. But now, as I've just shown you, they've cranked it up. Right now, as you watch this, Fake QR codes and malicious group invites created by UNC5792 are tricking new victims. People are scanning these codes, thinking they're joining legitimate signal groups, and instead connecting their accounts to Russian-controlled devices. On February 20th, 2025, Google's threat intelligence team exposed how these attacks keep evolving. UNC579 now uses sophisticated URIs that trigger automatic device linking. APT44 has updated their infamous Chisel malware to better extract signal databases from Android phones. Turla has refined their PowerShell scripts, making them nearly invisible when stealing messages. While you've been watching this video, October 2023, a new cyber threat. Hunters International hits the scene, targeting hospitals and homes. But is this really a new crew? Or a ghost from the past? I want to take you back to that moment. October 13th, 2023. A data leak site lights up with a new victim. An English company whose files are now on display for the world to see. The hackers responsible? Hunters International. Their name was fresh, but something about their code felt familiar to researchers tracking these threats. Just 6 days later, on October 19th, someone uploaded their ransomware to VirusTotal from a German IP address. VirusTotal is where security experts analyze suspicious files. And what they found was striking. Code that shared key similarities with HIVE, a ransomware group that law enforcement had supposedly crushed earlier that year. These weren't random targets. Hunters International hit healthcare systems and real estate companies specifically. What makes this story particularly disturbing is their focus on hospitals. These hackers aren't just after money. They're hitting systems where lives literally hang in the balance. Early 2024. Cybersecurity researchers combing through dark web forums discover something disturbing. Hunters International had unveiled their new weapon, the storage software. This wasn't your average malware. This tool, compatible with both Windows and Linux systems, was specifically designed to catalog stolen data. Patient files from hospitals, property records from real estate companies, all methodically indexed and managed. The software used Tor. That's a network that bounces your internet traffic through multiple servers, wrapping it in layers of encryption. Their default address was hunters55.onion. What makes Tor powerful for these criminals is it creates a maze that's nearly impossible to trace back to its source. When they steal data, what we call data exfiltration, they're not taking the whole database at once. The storage software just sends metadata about your files to their servers. Think of it like stealing the library card catalog instead of the books. They know exactly what they have and can show victims proof without handling massive file transfers. But Hunters International faced their own crisis on February 4th, 2024. Someone launched a TLS certificate spoofing attack against their Tor domains. They were targeting both Hunters 33.onion, which the group used for live chat with victims, and Hunters 55.onion, their data leak site. This type of attack is like creating fake ID cards for websites. The attackers tried to trick visitors into connecting to counterfeit versions of the hackers' platforms. For most criminal groups, this would be devastating. But Hunters International didn't crumble. They immediately mitigated the attack. Their operations team worked frantically to patch the vulnerability. Within hours, they'd secured their infrastructure. Hunters International had serious technical resources and knew how to use them. By August 2024, they'd released version 5.1.0 of their ransomware. This update was something else entirely: silent and deadly efficient. No ransom notes, no warnings, just systems suddenly locked tight. What made this version particularly dangerous was its ability to automatically mount disk partitions. It could find and access any storage drive connected to a computer without manual intervention. Even worse, it deployed its malicious code using RAIGSVR 32.exe, a legitimate Windows tool. This is a classic evasion technique. By using trusted Windows components, the malware flies under the radar of security software looking for suspicious programs. Hunters International was becoming something more dangerous, more resilient, and they were just getting started. November 17th, 2024. Hunters International posts a message that rocks the cybersecurity world. They're shutting down operations. Done. Finished. Their official statement cites actions taken by government bodies and the negative impact caused by ongoing geopolitics globally. Translation: law enforcement was closing in, and the heat was too much. The cybersecurity community celebrates cautiously. Another ransomware group neutralized. Case closed. But I didn't buy it. Neither did the analysts tracking them. The code similarities to HIVE were too strong. These weren't amateurs who'd give up so easily. Then, January 1st, 2025 arrives, and exactly as the internet is nursing its New Year's hangover, a new player emerges. World leaks. Their site appears on the dark web. Their code looks familiar. Too familiar. This isn't coincidence. This is Hunters International reborn. More precisely, this is HIVE's third evolution. But there's a critical difference. World Leaks isn't using ransomware anymore. They've pivoted to a pure extortion model. No more encrypting files or locking systems. Why bother with the technical complications when stealing data works just as well? Extortion only is exactly what it sounds like. They break in, steal your sensitive data, and threaten to publish it unless you pay. No encryption, no system lockdowns, just the threat of exposure. Think about it. If a hospital pays when patient records are locked, they'll definitely pay when those same records are about to go public. Same leverage, fewer hurdles. The group launches with a custom tool they claim is 100% fully undetectable, what security professionals call FUD. This means it's designed to slip past antivirus programs and security monitoring tools completely unnoticed. FUD sends its communications through multiple servers to hide its tracks using proxies. Despite some early bugs in their system, their approach is working. The FUD tool grabs data silently, with victims unaware, until they receive the extortion demand. This shift isn't random. It's calculated. Ransomware attracts heavy law enforcement attention. It disrupts operations, impacts critical infrastructure, makes headlines. But data theft? It blends into the background noise. They saw the writing on the wall. Ransomware groups were getting busted. Colonial Pipeline, JBS Foods, Kaseya. Each major attack brought more heat, so they adapted. Like chameleons changing colors to survive in a new environment. This is HIVE reborn. Leaner, meaner, and possibly more dangerous than before. After the rebrand to World Leaks, the hackers vanished deeper into the dark web. Not gone, just harder to track. Their fingerprints disappeared like smoke. Their malware continued to evolve. This isn't just code that runs the same way every time. This is code that actively rewrites itself, changing its signature to dodge antivirus programs. When your security software scans for known threats, it's looking for specific patterns. Self-modifying malware changes those patterns constantly. It's like trying to catch a ghost. Security researchers track their infrastructure to what's called bulletproof hosting, servers specifically designed to ignore legal takedown requests. Their provider, identified as AS 214822, gave them a place to hide, If you try to report abuse from these servers, your complaints disappear into a black hole. They spread their operation across multiple domains. huntersinternational.su, huntersinternational.bond, making them harder to shut down completely. Take down one site, another pops up. What makes WorldLeaks particularly dangerous isn't just their core team. It's their affiliates. Independent hackers who use their tools and infrastructure for a cut of the profits. Think of it as a criminal franchise model. The affiliates operate worldwide, making coordination against them nearly impossible. On August 7th, 2024, these affiliates received access to an updated tool through their portal, the Sharp Rhino RAT. RAT stands for Remote Access Trojan. Once installed on a victim's computer, it gives hackers complete control. They can see your screen, access your files, even activate your webcam or microphone without you knowing. I talked to one security researcher who'd infiltrated their communication channels. These aren't disorganized kids, he told me. They operate like a business. They have tech support, feature updates, even performance reviews for affiliates. The most successful affiliates get better tools and higher commission rates. In a dimly lit apartment somewhere in Eastern Europe, a coder tweaks the Sharp Rhino's code, testing it against the latest security updates. In a high-rise in Southeast Asia, another affiliate searches for vulnerable hospital networks. In a suburban home that could be on your street, someone else is sending spear phishing emails. No arrests, no raids, no clear trail for law enforcement to follow. Just a persistent, evolving and adapting threat. Self-healing networks, advanced encryption, automated data extraction, all designed to make their operations more efficient and harder to detect. Their next tool could be hitting your systems right now. The nature of fully undetectable malware means you wouldn't know until it's too late. Your data quietly being cataloged. Your secrets prepared for extortion. WorldLeaks hackers remain at large, but they aren't sitting idle. They've added a powerful new weapon to their arsenal: third-party OSINT services. OSINT means open source intelligence, information that's legally available to anyone with the time and tools to gather it. Social media posts, property records, professional profiles, court documents. All the breadcrumbs you leave online every day. Hackers like myself love them. These hackers target companies by digging into the personal lives of executives and their families. Phone numbers, home addresses, children's schools, vacation photos, financial records. They scrape this data systematically, building detailed profiles of decision makers who can authorize ransom payments. I heard about what happened to one of the CEOs that got popped, actually. They received a WorldLeaks extortion message. I overheard him saying, "They knew everything about me, where my kids went to school, where my wife worked, even where we'd vacationed last summer." The message came directly to my personal phone, not to my work phone. When an executive gets a call from an unknown number, and the voice on the other end starts describing personal details about their family while threatening to leak company data, that's a different level of pressure than a generic ransom demand. These attacks succeed because they target our human vulnerability. A company might have defenses, but a concerned executive who receives threats against their family creates a pressure point that bypasses all those safeguards. They're probably digging into your digital footprint right now. The best defense is understanding that we're all potential targets. It's limiting what we share online. It's questioning unexpected contacts. It's recognizing that in this age, our greatest vulnerability might be what we've already put out there for anyone to find. lock down your online accounts. Because they're watching, and they're getting better at it. Russian hackers don't hit Russia. It's an unwritten rule. OldGremlin smashed it. Welcome to the Hacker Gallery. I'm the operator, and today we're tracking a crew that rewrote the cybercrime playbook. March 2020. While the world locks down, a new shadow group emerges. But instead of targeting the usual Western banks or Asian corporations, they turn on their own backyard. Russian banks, Russian hospitals, Russian factories, all falling victim to a crew speaking their own language. This was OldGremlin, a Russian-speaking ransomware group that violated the cardinal rule of Russian cybercrime. You don't target Mother Russia. As cybersecurity firm Group IB noted, this choice breaks an unspoken rule among Russian hackers. It wasn't just unusual, it was a betrayal. In the world of Russian cybercrime, certain boundaries aren't crossed. Attack the West? Fair game. Target Asia? Go ahead. But Russia itself? Off limits. Why would they dare? The answer lies in what I'm about to show you. Not just of what they did, but how they evolved. From simple ransom demands to something far more sophisticated and dangerous. Their attacks weren't random. They were personal. This is where OldGremlin's story gets interesting. These weren't your typical spray and pray hackers. They studied their targets. They crafted their attacks. They knew exactly who they were going after and how to make them click. Let's break down how they evolved year by year. 2020, the groundwork. Late March, they launched their first wave. They're using two main tools. TinyPosh and TinyNode. These are backdoors, basically digital side entrances that let them sneak into systems undetected. Once inside, they can control computers remotely, stealing data, planting malware, whatever they want. Their targets? Russian banks, medical labs, manufacturers, software companies. And the payoff? Up to $50,000 per attack. By May, they're getting bolder. I'm looking at a case where they posed as a journalist to hack a bank. Then they impersonated RBC, a major Russian news outlet, to get into a clinical laboratory. One click from an unsuspecting employee. And boom! TinyCrypt ransomware locks up hundreds of computers. This isn't your basic malware. TinyCrypt doesn't just encrypt files, it hunts down your backups and destroys them. It literally runs commands, showing you on the screen here, which is computer speak, for find all backup files and delete them silently. No backups, no recovery. Pay up or lose everything. August 19th. Belarus is experiencing political protests. OldGremlin seizes the moment. They send emails posing as the CEO of Minsk Tractor Works to Russian business partners. Inside the email? A zip file that unleashes hell on their network. It's opportunistic. It's calculated. Now, 2021. February. They've leveled up. A single phishing campaign using TinyNode hits multiple Russian companies simultaneously. The ransom demands skyrocket to $3 million. They're not just growing in technical skill. Their ambition is scaling too. Then March 22nd and 25th, 2022. They unveil Tiny Fluff. This is a Node.js backdoor, basically malware built on a programming platform typically used for legitimate web applications. It lets them run commands, showing you on the screen here, to take control of systems while flying under the radar of security software. Their primary target? A Russian mining company. The delivery method? Malicious documents hosted on Dropbox. A trusted service that rarely gets blocked by corporate firewalls. Throughout 2022, they launch 5 separate campaigns hitting banks, logistics companies, insurance firms, retail businesses, Ransom demands peak at $16.9 million, with an average of $1.7 million per attack. They're laser-focused on high-value targets now. Then they rewrote the rules. Ransomware for Linux. Listen, if you know anything about computer security, this should make you sit up straight. Most hackers target Windows systems. It's what most businesses use, it's where the money is. But Linux? That's a whole different ballgame. Linux is considered the fortress of the digital world. It runs the back-end servers for banks, stock exchanges, power plants. Critical stuff. Most ransomware gangs don't even bother with it. Too complex. Too secure. Not worth the effort. But in 2022, OldGremlin did something that stunned security experts. They deployed a Linux ransomware variant. With this, they hit Russian banks, logistics companies, insurance firms, and retailers simultaneously. Hundreds of systems locked up tight. Critical operations paralyzed. And the ransom demands? Up to $16.9 million. First, they sent those tiny fluff-infected documents through Dropbox. Once someone clicked, they gained initial access. That Node.js backdoor would run commands showing you on the screen here, basically giving them a hidden control panel into the network. Once inside, they deployed Cobalt Strike. That's a legitimate penetration testing tool that's been weaponized by hackers. It let them move laterally through networks using Remote Desktop Protocol, or RDP. Think of it like creating invisible bridges between computers. They also use Mail Pass View to harvest email passwords. This gave them deeper access and more ways to spread through the organization. But here's the killer move. After mapping networks and identifying Linux servers, they struck. They execute their Linux ransomware payload, an evolution of their tiny crypt malware. Linux underpins the most critical systems in banking, logistics, and retail. Systems everyone assumed were relatively safe. OldGremlin proved they weren't. No system, Windows or Linux, was beyond their reach, and OldGremlin wasn't done playing. After their Linux ransomware breakthrough in 2022, something strange happened. OldGremlin went completely dark. No new attacks, no digital footprints, no chatter on the forums where cybercriminals typically brag. As of April 2025, there's been no publicly documented OldGremlin activity. It's like they just disappeared. What made OldGremlin especially dangerous was their patience. Their average dwell time was 49 days. Dwell time is how long hackers stay hidden in your network before they actually pull the trigger. The industry average is about 21 days. These guys more than doubled that. Think about that. 49 days, lurking inside networks, mapping systems, stealing credentials, planting backdoors. That's 49 days of silently mapping networks, stealing credentials, planting backdoors, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Another thing that set them apart, they stuck to traditional ransomware. Most modern groups use what's called double extortion. They not only encrypt your data, they also steal it and threaten to publish it if you don't pay up. It's two threats in one. But OldGremlin? They focused purely on encryption. Old school. Effective. Clean. So, where did they go? That's the million-dollar question. Cybersecurity teams across Russia are still on high alert. Did they shut down after making enough money? Did they face pressure from Russian authorities for breaking the unwritten rule? Or are they simply retooling, planning something even bigger? OldGremlin might not be gone. They could just be evolving. Look, I've studied hundreds of hacker groups, but OldGremlin stands apart. They didn't just target Russian banks and hospitals. They hit an arms manufacturer in 2020. They weren't random opportunists. They knew their targets, possibly driven by local knowledge or deeper motives. Their phishing tactics were devastatingly simple. In 2022, they sent emails with subjects like urgent sanctions update on payment systems. Think about it. You're a Russian company dealing with international sanctions. This email lands in your inbox. It looks legitimate. Of course you're going to click it. That's the terrifying genius of OldGremlin. They understood human psychology as well as they understood code. They knew what would make you click. They used current events, political tensions, economic pressures, to craft perfectly timed lures. They hosted malicious files on legitimate services like Dropbox to bypass security filters. This is where it gets personal for you. One wrong click. That's all it takes. One email that looks important enough to open. One attachment that seems legitimate. And suddenly, your work is locked. Your bank accounts are inaccessible. Your digital life is held hostage. But this is a warning not just for OldGremlin. This is for the expansion. About copycats adopting these methods. About the techniques spreading beyond Russian borders. Their approach to phishing. Their Linux targeting capabilities. Their patience. These are playbooks that can be followed by others. So I'll leave you with this question. When that urgent email lands in your inbox tomorrow, and it will, what's your move?